host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Whoopsie. All right. Welcome, guys, to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the JB and Sabby show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, or every other Sunday, actually. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And happy Friday, guys. I hope you're looking forward to the weekend. I know New Year's Eve is this Sunday. I'm sure some of you have plans. If you want to shout out your plans in the chat, let me know. I have no plans. This year, I actually didn't plan to do anything, which is a little bit unusual for me. But I don't know. I've done the New Year's Eve thing so many times, right? So like I've done the whole like get dressed up and go out, and you have to pay a cover charge to go to even like your favorite like towny bar on New Year's Eve. Everything is overpriced. Like I've done that a number of times, and I'm just kind of at that point in my life where I'm like, I don't really feel like doing that anymore. So I don't know if I'm just going to go somewhere, hang out somewhere at a bar, maybe one that is not going to do a cover charge, because I'm just not about the cover charge life. I'm not about that life. Okay. That's something I think people are more into in their 20s. Like, let me stand in line for like an hour and pay this cover charge to only go into this bar or club for like an hour. So you get out of that phase as you get older. So maybe I may go to one that doesn't have a cover charge. But other than that, I actually haven't really planned anything out for like once, which is interesting. We have interesting stories to discuss tonight, guys. Actually, I'm discussing 5 stories. I only fit like 4 on the thumbnail, but I am discussing 5. But I have a really important question for you guys. There is that poll question. Don't forget to go ahead and answer that. That's related to the Donald Trump story. But I got a question, and I want you guys to be honest. I'm at that phase in my life where it's time for a change. This is a very, very important question. I promise you. I need you to tell me whether or not you want me to go back to brown hair Sabby or blonde hair Sabby? Very important question. Very important question. So I'm going to ask you guys, because I have an appointment Sunday, and I need to know. And be honest with me, please. So this is blonde hair Sabby. That's the blondest my hair has ever been. That's the blonde. And I did the blonde thing for like a year, maybe a little bit more than a year, not as long as I planned on in the beginning. I really did not intend for it to last that long. I really didn't. But my real hair color is black. Okay. When I started the show, my hair I already had like brown, like hair lights or whatever. Right. So that's the blonde. And then there is the brown hair Sabby. And be honest, because I really do value your opinion. I know I said this is important. It's really not that important, but you know what I'm saying. And this here is brown hair Sabby. So let me know, guys, brown hair Sabby or blonde hair Sabby? Let me know. Right now, I'm in that in-between phase, and I got to do something with it, because the hair is just, as you can see it. I'm in the in-between stage. Let's see what some people said. This is really interesting. JB said, do blondes have more fun? I don't know. I felt like my fun was still the same. So there was that. Rick said pink hair. Okay. Pink hair. Gamer said he prefers blonde. Okay. I'm just going through some of the comments here. Pravda said, you'd be you, Sabby. You look great regardless. Oh, thank you. Roger said, leave brown, go blonde. You become Kyle. You know what, Roger? Java says dark hair with blonde highlights. Captain says brown. Grassy says brown. I'm seeing a lot of brown. Saul says brown. VMter says purple. I don't think I'm gonna go purple. A kid says brown. It seems like most people. Lorez said blonde. Child of God said natty dread. Sabby, I'm not doing dreads. Deneen said brown. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go back to the brown. And it's winter now, so it's a perfect time for me to darken it again. Maybe one day I'll get back to the original black color, but I don't know. What is it, B? Thank you for the super chat. As a hairstylist and colorist and a fan, go brunette, maybe with some caramel highlights. I could do that. I could. Yeah, I just think the blonde has kind of run its course, you know? So I don't know. Trauma Queen, I was asking them if I should go back brown or if I should go back blonde. I'm in an in-between phase right now with my hair. That's why they're asking questions. They're saying these questions. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of brown. Bad Cookie said communist red. I won't do red, and let me tell you why. Red is very hard to remove. So if red is not done correctly, you're kind of stuck with it for a while. It also stains too, you know? So I don't know. But, oh, thank you guys so much. So sweet. All right. Well, this Sunday, I'm going back brown. I'll be back in the saddle again. All right. It's funny. I asked my, what's that? We need critical thinking. Please thy spouse and spouse please you. You know, it's funny. I asked my husband earlier too, like, did you like my hair when it was better, when it was brown, or did you like it more blonde? And he said, you look great regardless of what hair color you have. And I was like, good answer. I was like, good answer. But no, I actually convinced him. I finally got him to admit that he actually liked the brown better. So interesting. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Again, you're out here doing the damn thing, holding down the fort. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Betsy from MA, Massachusetts. Betsy, what's up? What is up? All right, guys. I'm laughing at those of you that said purple or pink. My sister would do that. My sister is very artsy. Like she majored in graphic design. Like she's dyed her hair blue, purple, pink, any type of color you can think of. That is definitely more her speed. But I don't think that's really my speed though. All right, guys, what are we discussing tonight? Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail for you. Tonight, we are discussing, whoops, wrong thumbnail. I am sorry about that. That's the one from last night. I don't even think I downloaded it. No, because I was using, oh, that's right, because I was using a different computer. Okay, let's do this right this time. Sorry, guys, it's Friday. It's been a long week. I hope you're ready to rock with me tonight, though. We do have some interesting things to discuss. Let's see. Ah, there it is. Okay, the correct thumbnail. Tonight, we are discussing, let's go ahead and share that thumbnail here. Saagar and Jetty and Tucker Carlson alert. We're going to talk about this discussion that they had about free speech, which I think is important to hear. It seems like Tucker Carlson is making the rounds on different shows. We're also going to discuss Jill Stein, RFK Jr., and Cornel West review. We are now coming to the end of the year, and we are going to do a review of the third-party independent candidates that seem to be making the most noise, that are polling significantly. We're going to do a review of how they started, where they are now, and what I think or who I think has the best strategy and where they're going to go from here. We're also going to discuss, oh boy, Zelensky in Ukraine is upset, and that has to do with Joe Biden. He is not hearing the news that he wanted to hear in reference to the United States support for Ukraine. We're also going to discuss, believe it or not, Donald Trump is back. We'll talk about what happened in the state of Colorado and the news coming from the state of Maine, my neighbor to the north. And we are also going to discuss this new story. Shout out to Roger Meadows for sending this to me, about young men choosing to abandon college. And I think that's an interesting story. So I do actually want to get started with that. So for those of you who are new and may not be aware, I worked in higher ed for a little bit over a decade, different schools, different programs, PhD programs, undergrad programs, master programs. So I've been an advisor for different programs. So I have a lot of different experience. But one of the things that I have noticed over the years is that college enrollment is starting to decline. Now, some people can blame the pandemic on this. Some people are going to blame the cost of student loans, the cost of tuition. But in particular, did you know that young men are choosing not to enroll in college? I kid you not. Let's get into this story here. Why are so many young men abandoning college degrees? Let's get into it. A large number of men are foregoing college, leading to an alarming gap between university-educated men and women, a new study found. The Pew Research Center discovered a large drop in male Hispanic high school graduates turning away from four-year colleges, while 42% were in attendance in 2011. The number fell to 33% in 2022. Now, obviously, I think we can point out one thing in particular that happened between 2011 and 2022, and that would be the pandemic, right? Obviously, that is somewhat of a factor here. White males had a substantial drop as well. While 49% attended college in 2011, the number moved to 40% in 2022. Again, remember in the pandemic here, the gap was significant for white high school graduates, as female white graduates were the most likely to enroll in college at 50%. So why are young men fleeing higher education in droves? Let's get to it. In part, the migration of young men away from college can be explained by a growing and widespread skepticism over higher education and the high student debt it often leads to, experts have said. In 2022, the total number of 18 to 24-year-olds enrolled in college had declined by 1.2 million since its peak in 2011. That coincided with the growing 1.75 trillion of student debt nationwide. Now, let's think about this for a second. Something else happened this year, right? Joe Biden decided to remove the student loan debt moratorium, right? So that means the student loan payments went back into existence. So yes, we are back to paying our student loans again. But also, all this talk over college tuition and student loan debt over the past couple of years, it has made some of these high school graduates start to question and rethink actually going to a four-year university. And I'll be the first one to tell you, you don't have to go to college. And you definitely don't have to go to a four-year university. There are other paths that you can take. I've actually said this to other students that I've had before that were considering going to grad school. And I actually told them, well, you don't have to go to grad school. Maybe just get a job first, start paying down some of these student loans instead of taking out more student loans and going to grad school. There are other paths that you can take. Some businesses are getting rid of college degree requirements. This is a huge one. A November survey of 800 U.S. companies by intelligent.com found that 45% of companies will get rid of bachelor's degree requirements for some positions next year. And another recent survey of 70,000 small businesses found that 67% of the surveyed employers believe college graduates aren't prepared for the workforce. I can second that. Part of the problem that you see with a lot of these universities, some of the courses that are offered at universities actually do not benefit you in the workplace. It just is what it is. I mean, art history, unless I am an art major and I'm trying to be an art historian, which is not easy to do, and you're going to have a very difficult time trying to find a job in that profession as well, art history really isn't going to help me in the workplace. That's not really giving me that experience. And the number of tests, exams that I had to take in undergrad, great. I did well in those exams. I did well in college. But how many of those exams actually prepared me for the workplace? The reality is most of them did not. My experience for the workplace came from internships. And that brings up another question. Internships. A lot of internships that are offered today are non-paid. So for students that take out student loans and they're not coming from families that can pay for their tuition outright, those students coming from working class families really do not have the luxury of accepting an unpaid internship. They have to work. When I was in undergrad, I had to work. I had a part-time job. I had a part-time job when I was in high school. What that shows you is that most of the internships, because they are unpaid, are going to kids that are coming from well-to-do families that can afford to take a job where they are not being paid. And I've called this out before. All internships should be paid. Everyone should be paid that are doing these internships, because it's really not fair to students that are coming from working class families. But that's where I got my work experience, not from those exams and not from most of the courses that I took. Now, there are some majors where that's going to be different, right? Obviously, if you're a nursing student, you're going to get some hands-on experience because you have to do clinicals. So you have to actually have that. Obviously, if you're a law student, you will receive some hand-on experience. But for a lot of the majors that are offered in undergraduate universities, you are not getting that hands-on experience unless you do an internship outside of the university. The higher ed system has worked itself out of a job. That's coming from Red Balloon CEO Andrew, by losing focus on the mission of preparing their students for their career. They've become a non-factor or even a negative factor in helping job seekers find a job. When I see this phrase non-factor, it reminds me of Kenya Moore from Real Housewives of Atlanta. There was an episode where she said, "You are non-factor." But that doesn't tell the full story. The reduced number of college students is largely led by men, with 1 million fewer young men in college today, as just 0.2 million fewer young women compared to 2011. Overall, only 39% of young men who completed high school are enrolled in college, down from 47% in 2011. A lot of men don't see the point of a degree when it's so expensive, and they feel a lot of nihilism about their job prospects post-college. That's coming from Athena Khan, the CEO of career and technical training platform Dreambound. Men might be more likely to feel a bachelor's degree is not necessary for career success. That's according to a Pew Research study from 2021. And also, I want you to think about this as well. There are other opportunities besides attending a university. There are trade schools. There's community college. A friend of mine from high school went to community college for 2 years, became a dental hygienist. She was making more than me years later, still made more than me. And I went to 4-year school and I had a master's degree. Just something to think about. And I also wonder about some of these trades, right? I'm thinking about people who are construction workers, plumbers, electricians. Usually you see men in those fields, right? Well, you don't have to go to a university to do those jobs. So that's something to think about. It goes on to say the labor shortages of the past few years have hit the trades harder than other industries. High school grads, particularly men who are attracted to the trades, are finding that they can earn good salaries without racking up tens of thousands in college debt. And this brings up another question, guys, I want you to think about. When we're thinking about some of these trades like construction work, electricians, plumbers, how often do you think high school guidance counselors and teachers are encouraging young girls at those schools to learn those trades? What about welders? We need people in these positions. I don't know about you, but I don't know a thing about plumbing. I don't know about you, but I don't know anything about carpentry. I don't know how to do construction work. We need people in those fields. But what I've seen over the past couple of years, I've seen a big push for we have to bring women into STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math. We have to push women into that. But where is the encouragement for high school teenage women to learn some of these trades like welding, carpentry, construction work? These are jobs that won't cause you to rack up a lot in student loan debt, and they pay pretty well for the most part. Something to think about. It goes on to say here, among adults who did not have a bachelor's degree and weren't enrolled in college, men were more likely than women to say they didn't attend college because they didn't want to, or because they didn't feel they needed more education for their desired job. Men and women said that not being able to afford a 4-year degree was a major reason for not attending college at equal rates. Now, here's the thing. It starts early. The reason for the widening gap go far deeper than the decisions men and women make upon graduating high school. It starts earlier than college. Listen to this, guys. Women are more likely to get accepted into college than men, and women are more likely to have better grades than men overall. There's been some research that says it's because girls have fewer disciplinary problems and are better at planning ahead. Interesting. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that's true? For my men in the chat, do you think that's true? Do you think that girls tend to have fewer disciplinary problems than boys when in school? Something to think about. As fewer men attend and graduate from college, there's an ongoing concern this could stifle men's estimated career earnings over time. According to Georgetown University study, college graduates earn $1 million more in earnings over their lifetime compared to those who did not graduate. But, I see different answers here in the chat. Gamer said maybe. Michael said yes and less ego. Golden Monarch said, I'm afraid so, Sabby. Eric said, not exactly, Sabby. Cool Blue said, females mature faster than males. Interesting. Well, it's not just a problem with men. When we look at this, I want you guys to see why more colleges. Actually, I want to start with this one first. I think I went to the wrong one. Oh. We'll go to this one. I just want to make sure I got the right. Oh no, I put the wrong one here. I'm sorry, guys. Man, I've been all over the place today. I had this other video that I do want to show. Balls. I don't know if I have it now. I have to start with the other one and then go back to that one. I'm sorry, guys. I had a brain fart earlier today. Am I allowed to say that on here, YouTube? I'm allowed to say brain fart. And of course, I didn't put it in my notes. I'll find it. We'll come to this one first and we'll go back to that one. I was going to go to, actually, I'll bring it up here. Sorry, guys. This is what happens when you go live. Anything could happen. Anything could happen. Yeah. Okay. I'll pull it up here. I thought I was prepared, man. Like I had this ready and now I don't know what I did with that one video. Is it decline? I'm sorry, guys. I wish I had something to entertain you here. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. I do want to go to this one first. Sorry. We're going to talk about college decline across the board because it's not just this issue with men choosing not to attend college. The decline is happening across the board. Let's get into this clip here from ABC.
Now to higher education. Over the weekend, many high school seniors had to pick which college they'll attend next fall or if they'll go at all. Tonight, we take a look at a new study showing a drop in college enrollment this year by the numbers. Overall, spring enrollment is down 5.9% compared to this time last year. That's according to the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. Community college enrollment is down an even steeper 11.3% nationwide, and associate degree enrollment is down 10.9%, according to the Research Center. College enrollment by younger students age 18 to 20 dropped more than 7%. That's the biggest decline of any age group. Meanwhile, enrollment for bachelor's degrees dropped by only 2.2% this year, far less than for other types of degrees. And enrollment for graduate degrees, including master's and doctorate degrees, actually increased by 4.4% nationwide.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So you can see the decline there, right? So they were trying to warn people back then that these numbers are down. But there's another problem that's happening too. More and more colleges across America are actually closing. We've had quite a few of the small liberal arts colleges close here in Massachusetts, again, because they're offering degrees that don't actually produce jobs in today's economy. But you need to see this. Let's go ahead and bring in this clip here. Max is gonna, yep.
Picture this. You are an 18-year-old college freshman out navigating the world for the first time. Your weeks are filled with classes, studying, dorm food, annoying roommates, and your weekends, well, it's college. Your first steps into adulthood, independence, the whole world is ahead of you. Then it's all over. One day, someone walks into class and tells you, "We're so sorry, but your school is closing."
You know, Laker was honestly the perfect fit for me. I wanted to learn more, wanted to be outside more, wanted to do more just for myself, wanted to create more. I say college just was kind of a family away from family, but I definitely had to learn things, be knowledgeable, you know, and that was honestly the fun part. Because I think if I would have went to a big university, I don't think I would have lasted. I'll be honest. I think the small settings and all that kind of was a good fit for me.
So that's an example of a liberal arts college that is closed. It's been happening. Let's jump ahead a little bit here.
And could get even worse. Here's why. Lincoln College is one of 91 U.S. private nonprofit colleges that have shut down or merged with another school since 2016, affecting more than 60,000 students, just like Diva'sDoodles. This is part of a larger trend that's been picking up since the mid-2010s, with private schools leading public schools on annual closures. That's not including private for-profit schools, which made up more than 80% of college closures from 2004 to 2020. That's an entirely different issue. For now, let's focus on nonprofit colleges and universities. Of those 91 schools, half of them closed during or after 2020, and a whopping 68% of them closed because of financial reasons, with one consistent issue popping up: enrollment.
there are two significant issues that are affecting higher education right now, specifically through the admission and enrollment offices. Number one, it is the admission cliff, and that is the impending decline. We'll be graduating our lowest high school classes by population in 2025. And most enrollment professionals have been wringing their hands about this date of 2025, but many schools have seen those enrollment declines already. With the downturn in the economy that happened in 2007, 2008, there were simply less people born, but they were less people born specifically in different regions of the country, the Northeast, the Middle Atlantic states, and the Midwestern states. Right now, the majority of brick and mortar colleges and universities are in those places, but the population of students are no longer there. So
the population of students are no longer there. And part of that has to do with the fact that there are also other alternatives. For example, a lot of people are interested in the tech field, right? So you hear about all these people want to work in tech, which can be a very, very hectic and stressful career. I've had friends that have worked in tech. They work like 80 hours a week. I don't know that I would want that life, but they love what they do. So if you wanted to work in tech, let's say you want to be a computer engineer, for example, or software engineer, let's go with software engineering. Nowadays, you don't really have to attend a four-year university. There are all these different boot camps. And I have a friend that did a coding boot camp in like 6 weeks. And I don't know if 6 weeks is actually enough time to learn coding, but she did this coding boot camp, got a job just like that. There are also companies like General Assembly where they can teach you how to learn basically just what you need to know for that position. If you want to become a software engineer, you can focus on that at General Assembly, and you don't have to take all these extra classes like English 101 and the three histories. And like I had to take these things, 3 different history courses and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to do that. You just learn what you need to know for that job. Thus, General Assembly actually prepares people for the career that they want to do, and it gives them that hand-on experience. You can do it online or you can do it in person. They have an employment rate that's over 95%. So if you're going into that type of field, maybe you may say, I don't want to go to a four-year college that has expensive tuition and I don't want to take out all these student loans. I'm just going to go to General Assembly, do what I need to do, and take it from there. Other alternatives, that's another thing.
admission teams have to think about enrollment by strategy. 95% of the majority of four-year colleges in the country, particularly private schools, but many public schools as well, are 95% tuition driven. So the idea of enrollment driving finances and financial health of those schools is a given for most colleges and universities. So take one of those away, then take away the idea of enrollment being a given, then finances at that particular school are called into question. And then the end result of that is we see some schools closing, particularly private schools.
2023 added a new layer of financial stress for already struggling schools, the removal of federal stimulus money. In the original wave of pandemic stimulus bills, Congress passed $14 billion in relief funds for colleges and universities in what was called the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund. Those grants must be spent by mid-2023.
Things are getting more and more challenging as the year progresses in terms of enrollment, in terms of operating performance, including the inflationary environment, labor market, you name it. It's a reflection of, I think, an unsustainable operating platform, meaning a heavy reliance on tuition, which can't always keep up with inflation. It can't always keep up with erosion in enrollment, can't keep hiking tuition sticker price in the hopes that the net residual once you account for scholarship and discounting.
So you see this average tuition and fees for private, nonprofit, four-year colleges, like we're looking at up into like the 40,000, some are more, a little bit more than that. And you can see how it has increased over the years, dropped down a little bit in 2023. But the reality is here, folks, is that there are other opportunities. A lot of the younger people don't want to take on more student loan debt. They've seen the disaster stories. And again, a lot of these colleges that are closing, a lot of them are small liberal arts schools that, again, do not prepare people for jobs in this economy. So that's another reason. So if people are not attending those schools, then the schools are not making money because students are customers. So those colleges aren't making money. So thus they have to go forward and close their doors. That's why a lot of these schools, these small liberal arts schools, are closing. Now, that being said, even when you look at some of the larger schools, some of the larger universities, they're still having problems as well. When I said a while back, we really have to find a way to put some type of pressure on these universities to prevent them from increasing the tuition to the point that it's out of reach for the average person. I'm serious about that. There's no limit here. These universities have continued to increase tuition to a point where it's absolutely unbelievable when you talk to people that are my parents' age and you ask them how much tuition was when they went to college. It also has not seemed to, it doesn't seem to help in reference to the wages that people are being paid when they leave these schools and they have a lot of student loan debt, and the wages are not adjusting for inflation. So there's that. The name of this video, I don't want to focus too much on it because it is rather long, but the name of this video is called Why More and More Colleges Are Closing Down Across America, if you want to see the full video. But this is a sign, folks, and I've said this before, that when you start college, you have no idea that the field that you want to go into is still going to be profitable by the time you graduate from college. I remember when people were majoring in PR, public relations, right? Then we hit a recession. Guess who starts laying people off? PR companies, advertising companies, right? They're usually first to go. And people that go into positions that are HR positions, those people are usually first to go. So you really don't know. You don't know what is going to happen. Richard Wolff said that a recession is usually due to happen in this country every 4 years, which means to tell you, if you're going to school for 4 years, there's a slight chance that possibly by the time you graduate, we could be entering a recession. One of the fields that they mentioned, thank you so much for that, Rick says, is, oh, where did it go? Someone said, Sebastian, is social work relevant? Thank you for bringing that up, Sebastian. That's another field that I feel like it's needed. You need people in that field in social work, but social work is another field that is underpaid. I have friends that have been social workers. They require them to have a master's degree, but then they're not making enough to barely make a living. And that's a hard field to go into. I'm just keeping it real. People kind of look at you as a baby snatcher, even though not everyone that is a social worker removes kids from family homes, just FYI. But that's how people kind of look at you. You have to deal with all different type of personalities, etc. It is what it is. But the point is, folks, the country's changing. And I don't know what it's going to be like 10 to 15 years from now. But if these colleges do not find a way to either maintain the tuition, decrease the tuition, if they continue to increase tuition at the rate that they're going today, the enrollment numbers are going to continue to decrease because the middle class in this country is also shrinking. Something to think about, folks, but take that home with you. Young men choosing not to attend college. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you, Meteor Dreams. Happy New Year, Sabby. Many great things happen in 2024. Thank you. Lamar says, hey, Sabby, I just found you a couple of months ago on Rising. Love being a Sabby Sabs member because I get the truth here. Keep up the amazing work. Thank you so much and welcome, Lamar. Thank you, Sparky. You're gorgeous in any case. Oh, thanks. That's so sweet. Thank you, B. As a hairstylist, oh, I read that one. That's right. Thank you, Sparky. Sometimes the change is what's attractive. You can always change back too. That's true. Thank you for this one as well. Go Yemen, fight the power. Thank you, Polis. Tucker said Derek Chauvin didn't murder George Floyd. I heard about that. That's not the conversation we're having tonight, but I heard about that Honey, I got to watch the video, but I don't know where he's getting that from. Thank you, Sparky. Love you, Dream Girl. Thank you for this as well. A mountain of debt for a useless degree. Not everyone is cut out for a STEM degree, and the other degrees don't really put people ahead of non-degreed folks. And there are only so many teaching jobs. That's true. Thank you, Andre. My biggest regret is not going to college. In college right now to become a physicist at 45. Well, you know what, Andre? You do the damn thing. You know why? It is never too late. Never too late to go back. Thank you, Sailor. Love your show. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Unless you plan to major in anything STEM related, I would suggest staying away from four-year schools. And Eric is a teacher, for those who are not aware. Thank you, Cool Blue. Females may mature faster than males, in part due to biological clock. They have less time to waste. They want to get to building a life as an adult. Interesting. Thank you, Sparky. 100 years ago, Ladies' Home Journal recommend women marry white-collar men, so they wouldn't need to do as much laundry. That's funny. College presumably increased the likelihood of a white-collar job. It's a good point. Thank you, Cool Blue. Some people get a degree with little or no marketability. And thank you, P. Smith. Mike Rowe Works gives scholarships to trade schools. Interesting. And thank you, Sparky. Even in the 80s, many Fortune 500 company job postings would have or equivalent experience next to the degree requirement. Yeah. You don't see that as much now. Now it's just like must have bachelor's degree, right? Ay. Okay, we're getting into this story about Donald Trump. So a couple of days ago, we talked about the fact that Colorado decided to remove Donald Trump from the ballot for the 2024 presidential election. Well, in a shocking turn of events, Colorado has decided to change their mind. Believe it or not, they have decided to put Donald Trump back on the ballot. However, as they have decided to do that, it appears that Maine, my neighbor to the north, has decided to remove Donald Trump from their ballot. Let's get into the Colorado change of heart.
Here, Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law attorney and Fox News contributor. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. We've got some more news on this today, the Colorado case in particular. The Colorado Republican Party has challenged its appeal to the Supreme Court. What do we expect from here? How fast could the Supreme Court take this up? Does the Supreme Court take this up?
Well, it's a very good question because there is an exit ramp that not only Colorado might prefer, but the court itself might prefer. Colorado's Secretary of State agreed that Trump will stay on the ballot if the Supreme Court does not rule before the January 5th certification date for the state. And so what the position of the state is that unless the court agrees with the Supreme Court of Colorado, which is extremely unlikely, or declines any review, which is also unlikely, that Trump will remain on the ballot because there won't be any action. But what happens after that then becomes rather interesting because Colorado could move and say, look, well, this is now moot because there's no change on the ballot. People are going to be allowed to vote that way. And they could then avoid review by the Supreme Court. I think most of us believe that the Supreme Court is going to reverse the Colorado Supreme Court. So they may actually prefer to moot this out by having the court run out the clock. It's a very short period of time that the Supreme Court has to deal with this.
And one thing to keep in mind as well is that, remember, it's a conservative Supreme Court. So they're more likely, I would assume they're more likely to vote in favor of keeping Donald Trump on the ballot in Colorado, right? Remember, the GOP actually said, fine, you want to remove him from the ballot, then we'll just go ahead and run as a caucus, and that'll actually help Donald Trump.
If the Supreme Court, if they're looking at it, and sure they are, they have to now, there's a petition, at least whether they're going to take it up or not. And you've got Colorado, and then you've got Michigan, and on all the states on the other side. And now you have these other challenges coming up in other states. Does the Supreme Court look at this and say, guys, we've got to weigh in here?
I think they should. That there's no question in my mind that they've got to render a decision here. Many of us view this theory as not just unfounded, but dangerous.
Pause. I just want to get a good look at this map. So the yellow states are states with suits to bar Trump from the ballot. The green states are states that are pending appeals. So we have Oregon, Nevada, Wyoming, New Mexico, Alaska, Texas, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Vermont, and New York. Those are states with suits to bar Trump from the ballot. And I wanted you to see this because I want you to realize it's not just about Colorado. It's not just about Maine. There are other states that are actively looking to pursue this as well. So I do think it's going to get to the point where this is going to have to be ruled on a national level, where the Supreme Court may have to step in here. And this is dangerous in a sense that whether you like Donald Trump or not, and I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but the thing is, this can happen to anyone. Also, I'm going to ask you this now. We're going to talk about this towards the end of this story. Donald Trump has not been found guilty of an insurrection. That's why I have that poll there for you in the live chat. He is not, as of right now, he has not been found guilty. Let's continue.
And it's going to create instability in a system that has been historically the most stable democracy in history. And this is all happening on this reduced schedule. We are waiting for decisions in places like Maine, which could very well follow Colorado. So the Supreme Court needs to, in my view, put this theory to rest with finality and hopefully with unanimity. But we will see. You know, the Supreme Court often takes exit ramps when they're available. And if they don't rule before the 5th, this may be mooted out. But I'm hoping it will not be. I think there's arguments to be made that this will still not be moot.
Of all the issues that may come up before the Supreme Court as they relate to former President Trump, there's his immunity claim. There's the law pertaining January 6 prosecutions. Which has the most gravity to the constitutional system, do you think?
I think this one does. With the immunity issue, I think the odds are against Trump prevailing. There's going to be a ruling by the D.C. Circuit, which is motivated to make fast work of this. And I think that panel is likely to reject this theory. I'm not too sure the Supreme Court would embrace as broad an immunity claim as Trump is making here. But for Trump, it's the same issue we just talked about. For him, it's how much time you can take off the clock. Because there's a March trial date, which looks really unrealistic at this point for the special counsel. The question is, will the Supreme Court follow regular order and run down this clock more? It's like a fourth quarter play in the NFL. They're trying to leave Smith with as little time as possible to get down the field before the general election.
So Colorado has decided to reverse their decision and allow Donald Trump back on the ballot. Like, we really do live in a cartoon. I really do feel this way. I really feel like we live in a cartoon in this country, right? Now, that handles Colorado. But now the state of Maine has decided to remove Donald Trump from their ballot. Now, Maine's pretty important because remember, Maine does have ranked choice voting. Let's get into this one. We
have breaking news this hour as Maine's top election official has now disqualified Donald Trump from the ballot in that state, an effort that was underway. CNN's Caitlin Polantz has just read this filing and is following this. Caitlin, what is the Secretary of State saying in this decision here?
Caitlin, the Secretary of State of Maine is saying that Donald Trump is not qualified to be on the ballot in the primary in the state of Maine after reviewing petitions from different people who came to her and wanted to remove Trump from the ballot. I'm still looking through it, but one of the findings here from the Secretary of State is that Trump must meet certain qualifications to be able to be on the ballot, and is finding that he is not meeting those qualifications, and thus thus cannot be on the ballot. Now, this is a big decision from the Secretary of State of Maine. Make no mistake about that. It is in line with what Colorado appears to have done here as well, with the Colorado Supreme Court looking at Donald Trump being on the primary ballot there and saying he couldn't be. But the thing about Maine is that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to appeal this. So the Secretary of State is the person here making that decision instead of the court system. But what happens next is that Trump and others all have the opportunity to go to Maine's court system to appeal this. And all of that can play out in a very short amount of time. We could have some sort of resolution in the courts, depending on how fast the courts move and how fast everyone goes to the court. It could be a decision where we're hearing the Maine's court system also coming in and interpreting the state law within a month or so, basically by the end of January.
Let me step in here for just a second and make something very clear. So just like Colorado, Maine is also a state that Donald Trump did not win. So it's like, but they do have ranked choice voting, though. Maine does have that, but Donald Trump did not win that state. So a lot of people are coming forth and they're saying, like, why is it the states that Donald Trump did not even win? Why are they doing this, knowing that Donald Trump most likely isn't going to win that state anyway? I believe because the idea is that it will spread. Remember what I told you before about ballot initiatives? And I said there's 24 states in the US that are ballot initiative states. And everyone tells me, but my state is not a ballot initiative state. But the idea is that once one of those states that is a BI state were to pass legislation such as legalizing marijuana, for example, like we did in Massachusetts, it puts pressure on the surrounding states that are around it for them to do the same thing. And that's exactly what happened here. We passed legalization of marijuana here in Massachusetts. That put pressure on Connecticut, New York, New Hampshire, although it failed in New Hampshire by one vote, which was really weird. Vermont, etc. It puts pressure on those surrounding states. So the idea, I think, is that these states like Maine and Colorado, they'll make their voices heard, and then it will put pressure on the surrounding states to do the same thing. And before you know it, they'll have like so many states in the US that have removed Donald Trump from the ballot to make it almost impossible for him to win in the first place. Now, the thing is this: if you're going to beat him at the ballot box. Doing these types of moves that the states are doing right now, it actually just makes Donald Trump look like a martyr. And I said this before when they brought up all these charges against Donald Trump. Again, you ain't got to like Donald Trump, but we need to put partisan politics aside for just for example, and see what's actually happening here. What they're actually doing is they're trying to make it impossible for Donald Trump to even have a chance to win. And they know that he's beating Joe Biden in the polls. So they know that he has a good chance to actually win. And you don't have to be a Trump supporter to see it for what it really is. Let's flip it and pretend it was a Democrat candidate that they were doing this to. Also, in reference to the call of the insurrection, and we're going to go through the definition of what insurrection actually means, you also have to remind yourself that Donald Trump has not been found guilty of that charge. That's why I have that question in the poll. So I see a lot of people, and I saw it on Facebook earlier today, a lot of people cheering this on because they don't like Donald Trump. It just reminds me of when people were cheering on Donald Trump and Alex Jones for being, censored, being removed from platforms, until it started to happen to people on the left. So don't get too excited and start clapping, because for some of you that you still want to support the Democratic Party, I'm here to let you know, don't forget, Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, and Cenk Uygur have also been removed from ballots in 4 states in this country. This isn't just happening to the Republican Party. It's happening to anyone that they don't want, by they, I mean the establishment, the donor class, that they don't want to have a chance. Let's continue.
And so, Caitlin Polantz, just because this is breaking news, we truly have just gotten this in. I just want to be clear. The Secretary of State here is pausing her decision pending potential action from the Supreme Court.
I have not gotten to that point in reading this conclusion yet. I would have to look at that a little bit more closely. Things get very complicated when it comes to pausing rulings. But one of the things with this that we should be very clear about here is that the courts are almost certainly going to be weighing in, both state courts in Maine, because there's all kinds of things in the law for Maine to allow Trump or others to appeal this decision from the Secretary of State. That state court can look at it. And of course, Caitlin, the Supreme Court of the United States is already looking at that petition from Colorado's Republican Party saying, please weigh in, because every state has a different process and is making different decisions about Donald Trump being on primary ballots in 2024.
I mean, Caitlin, this is fascinating given what happened in Colorado just last week when the Supreme Court there decided to remove Donald Trump from the primary ballot in a 4-3 decision. That was unprecedented. We had never seen that happen in our nation's history. Now it has happened for a second time in the state of Maine, following the decision by the Michigan Supreme Court to say, we're not getting involved in this. He can stay on the ballot. I think what's important here is a little bit of background, because for those who haven't been following this closely, there are 3 complaints here, and 2 of them were based on the same section of the Constitution that decision in Colorado was, which is, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, basically finding, that Trump, as they did in Colorado, he could not hold office again because of his actions on January 6th. Given the difference here and how this went not through the courts, but to the Secretary of State, what could that mean for the future of the decision that has just been made by the Secretary of State in Maine?
Yeah, well, who is making this decision is always going to be a question, especially if the U.S. Supreme Court looks at this. So in the situation in Colorado, it was the Supreme Court of Colorado, the highest court in that state, looking at basically holding a trial to determine Trump was an insurrectionist in their view, and also determining they had the ability to take him off the primary ballot under the state's law. Now, in all of the other states, including in Maine, there is always going to be a question before the Supreme Court. Can these people even do this? Can a Secretary of State make this sort of decision in party primaries related to who voters can cast their ballots for? And so
apparently so. Apparently they can. This is crazy. Apparently they can make that decision. I mean, it was just a couple of days ago where Marianne was saying that the Secretary of State of Massachusetts actually needs to be vocal, and they can actually make the decision to decide to allow them to be on the ballot because they've been removed from the ballot in Massachusetts as well. Apparently, the Secretary of State can make that decision.
Whenever this goes to the Supreme Court, it's very unlikely at the very beginning, right now, where we're still in this primary process, this first emergency application is before the U.S. Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court, the 9 justices in Washington, D.C., that they're going to be making a call on whether Trump is an insurrectionist or not. They're very likely going to be looking first at the sort of thing that the Colorado GOP wants them to look at, saying, you can't remove the ability for voters to vote for certain people. And that's just the big question that is before the Supreme Court as far as the papers we have right now.
But then what does that say about the Democratic Party, though? Because the DNC has been doing this. The DNC has been removing candidates from the ballot. Marianne, Dean, and Cenk Uygur have been removed from Florida, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And I'm a registered independent. I don't support Democratic Party or the Republican Party. But I don't understand why Caitlin Collins is pretending to be surprised here or whatever, because this has been known to happen. Look at what is happening in the very party that your network covers for. It's happening across the board. And I'm actually surprised when we get into RFK Jill Stein and Cornel West's review for the end of 2023, when we get into that story tonight, I'm actually surprised because with all this focus around getting Donald Trump off the ballot and getting Biden's Democrat challengers off the ballot, it seems like the third party and independent candidates seem to be getting on the ballot a lot easier than people thought they would. We're going to get into that story. So it's almost like the focus has been taken off of them.
Caitlin Pullen, stand by, because I know you're reading through this decision. Come back with us with more. We also have Norm Eisen and Michael Moore here with us. Norm, what's your reaction to this decision by the Maine Secretary of State saying that Donald Trump cannot be on the ballot there?
Well, Caitlin, it's a part of a pattern now, and it's not just that the Colorado courts came to this decision. Remember, the January 6th committee looked at these same issues and also determined that Donald Trump had engaged in insurrection. So I think it validates the concerns of those who believe that the former president is not qualified. As we've talked about, every state addresses this question of how they will or will not apply the 14th Amendment differently under their state laws. Here, in this decision that we're still reading from Maine Secretary of State Shayna Bellows, what she says is that Donald Trump's petition to be on the ballot, where he says he's qualified, is not accurate because he's not qualified under the 14th Amendment. Very momentous.
All right, folks. Let's go ahead and look at this definition and then I want to get into what Vivek Ramaswamy is now saying. Let's look at the definition of insurrection in reference to our politics here. This is from Britannica. Insurrection. What happened to the what happened here? Did you guys seriously just this was just here a minute ago? Let me refresh it. Very weird. All of a sudden, the definition has disappeared. Why are you doing this to me? I'm sorry, guys. Some of you are probably like, Sabby is all over the place tonight. Why is it not? I don't understand the site. It showed. Oh, here we go. All right. It's all the way down here. All right. According to Britannica, insurrection, an organized and usually violent act of revolt or rebellion against an established government or governing authority of a nation, state, or other political entity by a group of citizens or subjects. Also, any act of engaging in such a revolt. An insurrection may facilitate or bring about a revolution, which is a radical change in the form of government or political system of a state, and it may be initiated or provoked by an act of sedition, which is an incitement to revolt or rebellion. So, usually a violent act. And this is the piece I think a lot of people keep pointing back to. Was he guilty of that? So there's that. There's that, right? Something to think about. The violent part. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy has spoken out once again now that Maine has decided to ban Donald Trump from the ballot. And he's standing firm on what he said before, that himself and other candidates that are running through the Republican Party, they should all step down as well in solidarity with Donald Trump. And I think, honestly, that's, again, it's a PR move, but it's actually a smart move as well, because if all of the remaining GOP candidates say, you know what, we're going to remove ourselves from the ballot in those states as well, then you could really bring about some type of change, because obviously they're not going to allow it to where every single candidate is not on the ballot in these states. Let's hear what Vivek has to say.
Secretary of State has kicked former President Donald Trump off the primary ballot. Democrat Shayna Bellows, pictured here with Joe Biden. Look at her there with President Joe Biden, is following Colorado's suit disqualifying Trump based on the insurrection clause. And guess what? She's a Democrat. Much like Colorado, Bellows' decision will likely be challenged in court. Speaking of which, in a stunning turn of events, Trump is back on the primary ballot in the state of Colorado. Secretary of State Jenna Griswold announcing this afternoon that she will certify primary ballots with Trump's name on them, unless the U.S. Supreme Court steps in. Vivek Ramaswamy is a 2024 presidential candidate. Here he is. Vivek, the secretaries of states in 2020, secretaries of states, one individual would come in and wipe away the laws of the legislature and say, because of COVID, I'm changing mail-in balloting. One person changing election rules. That was 2020. 2024, one person saying, I am disenfranchising Trump voters. Your thoughts?
Well, look, Kayleigh, I think you phrased it well, but I would say that this is not an action of one person. This is the action of an entire system that has an anaphylactic reaction to one man. And I think they're dropping the breadcrumbs. They're making it clearer by the day. I'm concerned that they will not allow this man to get anywhere near the start line of the election, let alone the finish line. And I say this as somebody who's running in the same race as Donald Trump. This is not how we should want to win. So I stand by the pledge I made earlier on the back of the Colorado decision, and I reiterate it today, that I will voluntarily, as a Republican candidate, remove myself from any GOP primary ballot where one of my competitors, Donald Trump included, is forcibly removed through this unconstitutional maneuver. And I think one thing that the other Republican candidates can do, Kayleigh, is to fight against this, to say that Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie do the same thing, that if Maine is going to do this, we then take Maine out of the GOP primary process. That's the logical way to handle this. And so I made that announcement tonight. I challenge every one of my other competitors in the GOP primary to do the same thing, to say that we will not stand by idly and watch this brazen form of election interference in the GOP primary itself. And I think that that's not a left-wing or a right-wing issue. It shouldn't be. This is about the Constitution and who we are as Americans. And that's why I've taken the position I have.
Yeah, so one thing I want to add here too, to that point, we pretty much know that Maine is most likely going to go to the Democratic Party anyway. So what harm would that do if all of the other GOP candidates decided to remove themselves from the ballot in Maine? Actually, I think that would prove a point, right? That's showing some type of solidarity. But again, I think that, Vivek Ramaswamy at this point in time, he knows, according to his poll numbers, that he's obviously not going to win the GOP nomination. So what is he doing? He's putting his second best foot forward, right? Let me see how I can work this and make it so that if Donald Trump does win the nomination and does win the general, then maybe he would consider me for vice president, or at least to be a member of the cabinet. It's chess, not checkers. That's actually very smart. But I think the bigger issue here is the fact that the number of times you have heard, particularly the Democratic Party, say that we have a democracy and we have to protect that democracy. What you see happening right now to Donald Trump, what you see happening right now to the other Democrat challengers that are challenging Joe Biden by removing these candidates off of the ballot, that just shows you once again that we don't have a true democracy. If you want to beat Donald Trump, the best way to do that is at the ballot box. But all of this interference that is coming into play is trying to make it impossible for voters to even make that decision. And I think that's a really big mistake. I want to be very clear here. I do not support Donald Trump. I do not endorse Donald Trump. But I think it is incredibly huge mistake what they are doing right now. I think this would backfire on them. This is not going to make the American people trust democracy. This is not going to make the American people trust the voting system that we have in this country. And once again, it just shows you that this country, again, is ran by the billionaire class, and they're the ones that are making all the decisions. I'm pretty sure that decision that was made in Maine and Colorado had some money behind it. Pretty sure it had some money behind it.
Yeah, it's a bold position. It's a principled position. And I want to get your take on this. So President Trump, he reacted to the news that you were going to stop spending money on TV ads. He said this on Truth Social. He will, I am sure, endorse me, but Vivek is a good man and is not done yet. Is that something, I mean, I understand you don't have plan Bs. You said that. Is that something you would consider at the right moment, should it come to that? So not a plan B guy.
Well, I actually have been clear,
What about
Kayleigh.
vice president?
I've been clear. Look, if Trump is the nominee, he has my full support and backing all the way, just as I expect his if I'm the nominee. I actually think we're going to deliver a major surprise in Iowa. I'm talking to you from the back of the campaign bus between two stops in rural Iowa. I think we're going to have a major surprise on January 15th because many of the supporters backing me, they're not polled. Many of them aren't even traditional caucus goers, many of them young, some of them past libertarians, other America First conservatives who haven't been traditional Republicans. So I think you're going to see a shock on January 15th. I think we're going to shock the world. I think the polls are dead wrong. But either way, I do think it needs to be an America First candidate leading our movement forward. And I think I'm best able to reach that next generation, Kayleigh, as a young person. That's why I'm going to see this all the way through, and I think we're going to win.
Hey. Well, Vivek, in order to do that, you're going to have to make sure you're not supporting funding for Israel either. I'm going to add that in there. Let's go ahead and see that poll. Speaking of polls, there was a poll pinned to the top of the live chat. How did you guys respond in reference to this issue with Donald Trump? I'm curious to see these answers here. The poll question is, I know we can get some more votes. We got 650 votes. We have way more people watching. Maybe we can get some more votes here, but it says, do you agree with states removing Trump from the ballot? Yes, if he's found guilty. This is guilty of the insurrection. 19% of you said yes if he's found guilty. 6% said yes regardless of guilt. 57% of you said no regardless of guilt. And I gotta love these folks here. 18% said I really don't care. So interesting. The majority of you said no regardless of guilt, which means that you think that this decision should come down to the ballot box. It's going to be an interesting time, you guys. It's going to be an interesting time. Let me go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super sticker, Nelson. Jay Tolbert says, damn, they really don't want this to be president. This is very dangerous. Thank you for the super chat, Polis. Didn't the Colorado Supreme Court found him guilty? I don't think they found him guilty. They said that, well, they said that he was guilty of, inciting the insurrection. And that's in their opinion, but he has actually not been found guilty of that charge yet. Thank you for the super chat, Blarg. Oh my God, it's a mirage. I'm telling y'all, it's sabotage. Beastie Boys, my Sabby hype music. Love your show. I love that song from the Beastie Boys. I love it. I can't stand it. I know you planned it. Thanks for the super chat, Cool Blue. The court ruling in my state, Bellwether, Michigan. Oh, you like the court ruling? Okay, yeah, Michigan said they're not going to do that. Thanks for the super chat. Nobody voting Nikki Haley. Who made this account? Nobody voting Nikki Haley. Political theater. Thank you, Ricky B. Roaming. This is all making a mockery of our so-called democracy. Hashtag Trump 2024. Interesting. Thank you, Polis. The indictments have evidence of his criminality, though, right? But he has not been convicted. That's the thing. They say they have evidence, but he has not been convicted. Thank you for the super chat. Nobody voting Nikki Haley. January 6th was we're just going to leave that there because I know how YouTube can be. Lloyd says, I'm no expert in American politics, but unless the person is convicted of a crime, people should be allowed to vote for them if they want. Otherwise, it feels like the ops are rigging the system. I hear you there. Shout out to Hardlands Media. Huge thank you for Sabby Sabs. Your words of support have meant the world. Yes, guys, please make sure you go over and follow Hardlands Media's channel as well. I know they're going through a huge debacle with YouTube. So, and follow them on Twitter so you can stay up to beat with that issue there. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. YouTube won't let me mention PSL in super chat. See pre-comment. Okay, I don't know what pre-comment is, but thank you. Thank you for the super chat, Cool Blue. Maine can be won by Republicans if they carry its second congressional district better than Democrats in its first. This is how U.S. Senator Susan Collins was reelected in 2020. That's a good point. JB says, remember that Eugene Debs was in prison when he ran for president. Right. And thank you, Lorez. IIRC Maine is one of the two states, Nebraska, that do electoral college votes by popular vote. So it matters if Trump is on the ballot. He could still get electoral votes for Maine. Interesting. All right. We are moving on to the next story. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. If you're a newbie around here, don't forget to sub and share. All right. We're moving on to this story about Ukraine. I don't know if you guys have heard the news, but it appears that the Biden administration is finally admitting that Ukraine can't win. This is a huge story coming from Politico. Oh my God. Oh my God. The Biden administration is quietly shifting its strategy in Ukraine. Let's go on here. Oh, Zelensky, you thought you had a friend. Say he's just a friend. Say he's just a friend. Oh, baby, you. With the U.S. and European aid to Ukraine now in serious jeopardy, the Biden administration and European officials are quietly shifting their focus from supporting Ukraine's goal of total victory over Russia to improving its position in an eventual negotiation to end the war. Oh, folks, this is embarrassing. Embarrassing for Zelensky and for the Biden administration. This is a hot mess. Such a negotiation would likely mean giving up parts of Ukraine to Russia. Isn't this what we predicted? This is what we predicted. Those of us at RBN, we predicted this a year ago, 1 year ago, that this would be the case. The White House and the Pentagon publicly insist there is no official change in administration policy, that they still support Ukraine's aim of forcing Russia's military completely out of the country. But along with the Ukrainians themselves, U.S. and European officials are now discussing the redeployment of Kyiv's forces away from the Ukrainian president Zelensky's most failed counteroffensive into a stronger defensive position against Russian forces in the east, according to the administration official and the European diplomat, and confirmed by a senior administration official. This effort has also involved bolstering air defense systems and building fortification, razor wire obstruction, and anti-tank obstacles and ditches along Ukraine's northern border with Belarus, these officials say. In addition, the Biden administration is focused on rapidly resurrecting Ukraine's own defense industry to supply the desperately needed weaponry the U.S. Congress is balking at replacing. Listen to this part. We're going to highlight this one because this is the kicker. The administration official told Politico magazine this week that much of this strategic shift to defense is aimed at shoring up Ukraine's position in any future negotiation. That's been our theory of the case throughout. The only way this war ends ultimately is through negotiation, said the official, a White House spokesperson who has given anonymity because they are not authorized to speak on the record. You guys hear this? They're finally admitting it. That has been our theory of the case throughout. The only way this war ends ultimately is through negotiation. Boom. Think about all the billions of aid that the U.S. government has sent to Ukraine over the past year and a half, knowing from the very get-go that they had no chance of defeating Russia. All that money went out the door. We want Ukraine to have the strongest hand possible when that comes. The spokesperson emphasized, however, that no talks are planned yet and that Ukrainian forces are still on the offensive in places and continue to kill and wound thousands of Russian troops. We want them to be in a stronger position to hold their territory. It's not that we're discouraging them from launching any new offensive, the spokesperson said. This spokesperson who doesn't even want to give their name because they're afraid. For Biden, navigating the nearly 2-year-old war in the middle of a tough election campaign with former President Donald Trump and other Republican candidates openly mocking his efforts will prove tricky at best, as it helps Ukraine shift to a more defensive posture. The Biden administration can't appear to be handing the advantage to Putin after insisting since the war began in February 2022 that it stands fully behind Zelensky's pledge of victory over Moscow. Well, they should have never given that pledge in the first place. They knew from day one that they would not win. They knew this. Again, this is a proxy war. It was instigated by NATO. And you have to understand, again, when we talk about negotiations, let's all remember Russia wanted to negotiate from the very get-go, wanted to negotiate. Zelensky did not. That's why we're here. It goes on to say here, those discussions about peace talks are starting, but the administration can't back down publicly because of the political risk to Biden. Let me highlight this one for you. You guys see, it's all theater. Those discussions about peace talks are starting, but the administration can't back down publicly because of the political risk to Joe Biden. This is all theater. Billions of dollars just went out the door. I wonder if they figured out who this person was that gave this information and if they'll still have a job by the end of this year. In an interview on December 21st, John Kirby, head of strategic communications at the National Security Council, said that with Washington nearing the end of our ability to provide military assistance to the Ukrainians because Republicans have blocked Biden's request for roughly $60 billion more in aid, the Biden administration is very focused on helping them on offense and defense. Let me debunk something here that John Kirby said. John Kirby said that Republicans blocked Biden's request for roughly $60 billion more in aid. Didn't Joe Biden go around Congress to give aid to Israel? Didn't Joe Biden just do that? So the same way that Joe Biden can go around Congress to give aid to Israel, Joe Biden can go around Congress to give aid to Ukraine. So this fits the theater, because they have to get the Democrat voters to believe that the reason why they can't give aid to Ukraine is because of the Republican Party. And yes, there are Republican congressmen and women who will not support this via votes. But the same way he has gone around them for Israel is the same way he could go around them for Ukraine. But he's not doing that because he's trying to, again, convince you that the Republican Party is far worse and they're blocking Joe Biden from doing things. You see, they think that we're asleep. They think that people aren't paying attention. Knock, knock. Didn't we just see you go around Congress and give money to Israel? There it is. There it is. We are having literally daily conversations with the Ukrainians about the battlefield, about what their needs are and their intentions, Kirby said. But he added, I'm not going to telegraph to the Russians what the Ukrainian strategy is in the coming months. So there you have it, folks. They are finally admitting that Ukraine can't win. My comrade Nick from RBN had something to say about all of this possibility of a peace deal. Let's hear what Nick said. He's highlighting this article from Aaron Mate, which says Ukraine's top negotiator confirms U.S.-UK sabotage peace deal with Russia. Listen to this.
We have another source that describes how the United States and UK prevented a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's top negotiator explained that last spring in Istanbul, Vladimir Putin and Zelensky was ready to sign a peace agreement. Then the deal stalled. So let me get this straight. The message that we was fed in the West is that Putin is a madman and is a waste of time to try to negotiate with him in good faith. The fact that we have the United States and UK that was the ones blocking peace deals completely destroys that narrative.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it was the United States And of course, the UK tends to follow the US lead, and the UK choosing to block the peace deal. Well. Again, all of this could have been prevented. All of this could have been prevented. The US wanted another war. They wanted another war. This makes Biden look so bad.
Now Ukraine is in a worse position than they was last spring, and they lost hundreds of thousands of men. And what exactly did they accomplish by rejecting this peace deal last year? Oh yeah, I forgot. Record profit for weapon manufacturers. Yes, that's right. Our ruling class, Joe Biden in the UK, they sacrificed an entire generation of Ukrainians for record stock profits and to very slightly weaken Russia. Now the Biden administration is quietly shifting their position after claiming that the end goal will be driving all of Russia out of Ukraine. Now the Biden administration is focusing on more of a defensive posture, and they want Ukraine to maintain the territories that they already have. Do you know how they would have accomplished that, Joe Biden? Maybe if you would have accepted the peace deal that was offered last year, that would have been possible.
That's right. So you see, the American people, I hope people remember this come next year when it's time to vote in November, because the thing is, Joe Biden wasted billions and billions of dollars, federal dollars, to fund Ukraine, knowing damn well from the very get-go, there was a peace deal from the very beginning that was possible. So the United States government and the UK that just followed behind the US like just a little sad little puppy dog, they are the ones that actually allowed this war to escalate to the point that it got to in the first damn place. All the money that went out the door, I call that money laundering. But we've been told over and over again that Russia was the bad guy. We've been told over and over again that Vladimir Putin is such an evil maniac of a person. And there's criticism to be had for Vladimir Putin. But the point is, our media and the US government and the State Department were lying from day one. From day one. But the thing is, when people pointed this out early on, they were called Putin puppets. They were called traitors, as if Ukraine is a part of the United States. All of this stuff, everything is coming out. And I told you as time went by, more and more of this information would be released.
And I really hope that Taiwan has their head screwed on straight. And they really believe the United States had their best interests at heart. They're going to end up like the Ukrainians.
Yep. So there it is, folks. That was Nick giving a bit there. He does those snippets there for Hotspot. But that is a very, very, very interesting piece there. So this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing for the Biden administration. But folks, there were some folks in independent media that did try to warn people way ahead of the game. Mint Press News, The Gray Zone, Antiwar.com. Garland Nixon tried to warn people. Scott Ritter's been talking about this since day one. A lot of people tried to tell you, but no, all those people were smeared. Let's go to some of the comments here. Oh, I'm just making sure I'm not touching the same ones here. Okay, here we go. Thank you for the super chat. Polis, I disagree with your Ukraine stance. How would you feel if Canada invaded the US and committed genocide? Would you support giving up your land? Like what? I recommend, Polis, that you go back and start with the history. And one of the things that I've said on this show is that NATO actually pushed this from the get-go. You have to remember the rule that happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall. NATO was not supposed to move further to the east, but it did. So there's that. A lot of people want to start with Vladimir Putin invaded, and they want to forget everything that happened before that. Same thing with Israel and Gaza. Everybody want to start with, but October 7th, but do you condemn Hamas? Everyone wants to start with that instead of what happened before that. So go look at the history. Thank you for the super chat, Jay. So thousands of lives lost, billions of money spent, major inflation, and 2 nuclear superpowers in a proxy battle for what? What a waste. Not a waste for the military industrial complex, though. Thank you for the super chat, Polis. Ukraine people voted for EU and NATO. Stop. I don't know what to tell you, Polis. I would say, again, go look at the history. Thank you for the super chat, David. If we track preventable deaths under any POTUS, does Biden beat Bush at this point already? Biden has had a couple of wars, East Palestine, Ohio, Hawaii, etc. That's a good question. I'd have to look those numbers up. Thank you for the super chat, Paul. I'm Irish. Brits screwed me. Bastards. I'm sorry about that, Paul. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the super chat, Jay. Joe Biden took the most MIC money than all other presidential candidates in 2020. They got a huge return on their investment. B says, what is hotspot? So hotspot, if you guys follow, let me go back. I'll show you that really quick. Let me show you what a hotspot is, because I know someone else was asking me that as well. So if you go to, let me go up here. Oh, of course it would do this. Let me just go back to Nick's. This is the thing I hate about Twitter when it's like so many, Nick should have it on here. I don't even know Hotspot's IP, but Nick does a bunch of these videos for Hotspot. Anyway, Hotspot is this company. I'm trying to find, is Hotspot tagged anywhere? Nico also does these. Here we go. Hotspot. So Hotspot, it's a company here, a media company, and they have these short vids. So like Case Study QB, they'll also post media clips, but then they also have people like Nick and Nico House, and they basically create these very short news story clips. So that's what Hotspot is. Follow them on X, and then you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. But like, see how they post all these clips? But Nico and Nick, they do news clips for them where they try to condense a story down to like less than 2 minutes and 20 seconds, I believe. So yeah. Okie doke. Let's go to this story here about RFK, Jill Stein, and Cornel West. So now we're about to enter 2024. I think it's time to take a look at the strategy that these 3 candidates in particular have been using in reference to their 2024 race. We're focusing on these 3. Why? Because they are the ones that are actually polling in reference to third party and independent candidates. So we're focusing on RFK, we're focusing on Cornel West and Jill Stein. Let's start with RFK. And at the end, I'm going to tell you who I think has the best strategy by far. I know some of you are like, oh, Sabby, you're going to be biased. No, I don't think so. We're going to talk about this. We're going to break this down. First, we're going to start with RFK Jr. RFK Jr., his strategy right now has changed. Like, it's changed a couple of times throughout his campaign. You guys know how I feel about RFK Jr. I think his position on Israel is bullshit. You guys know that. I don't need to go over that all over again. But in reference to the strategy, I want to show you something that he's doing in reference to ballot access. Now, RFK Jr. has a super PAC. That's not a secret. I've shared that with you before. But look at this. RFK Jr. super PAC rolls out ballot access priorities. So this is a change. They have changed how they're doing things with this race. American values. Let's start from the beginning. The super PAC supported RFK Jr.'s presidential bid is narrowing its ballot access campaign to focus on 7 states 7 states, guys, including crucial battlegrounds that will determine the outcome of the presidential election. This is different. So they're not focusing on all 50 states. They're focusing on 7 states in particular. Let's see what those states are. American Values 2024 will now prioritize helping to get Kennedy on the ballot in Arizona, California, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, New York, and Texas. Let's take a look at those states. This is crucial, right? According to plans first shared with Politico. Now, why do I think this is actually smart? Arizona, that was actually the state that had a lot of independent voters come out to support Joe Biden for 2020. Arizona will be important. I'll mention that again with Jill Stein when we get to her. California, that's his home state. So that's all I got for that one. Sorry. Georgia, again, Georgia was a state that Joe Biden won. It was a red state. He turned to blue for 2020. There were a lot of young voters that came out heavily to support Joe Biden in Georgia, and a lot of African-American voters that came out to support Joe Biden in Georgia. Again, that state could change the race. Illinois is interesting. It's typically a blue state. I haven't come up with an answer for that one yet. I'm not quite sure why they picked that one. Come back to me later. Michigan. This one is huge. Michigan is one of the states that Joe Biden cannot lose. He is already doing poorly with voters in Michigan, particularly Muslim voters. They have voiced this. We've talked about this before on this show. So that is one of the states that he's focusing on there. That could be a game changer. New York. New York is interesting because in New York, and Jill Stein will have to deal with this too, she's not going to be able to run as a Green Party candidate in New York. They made it more difficult for third-party candidates, right? So she will have to run as an independent in New York the same way that RFK Jr. is going to run. But also, that's Trump's state. That's Trump's home state. So think about that. And last but not least, Texas. And why do I think they chose Texas? It's a border state. RFK Jr. went down to the border. He talked about the issue with migrants coming across the border, and he said that it was worse than he thought it was when he saw it with his own eyes. So obviously, Texas is going to be one of those states. So he can potentially win over voters in Texas on that issue alone. That's actually smart. Let me continue. Half of these target states were decisive in the 2020 race and won by now President Joe Biden by narrow margins. The promotion of a third-party candidate in these battlegrounds could change the pathway for a victory for the major party nominee, even if Kennedy only garners single-digit support next November. Okay. The 7 states will initially focus on, oh, you guys need to reword this, honey. Who wrote this article? The 7 states, the 7 states we will initially focus on have a total of 183 electoral college votes. Everybody counting this? Take notes, son. 183 electoral college votes and some of the highest populations in the country. That's PAC founder Tony Lyons. He said this in a statement. The Super PAC originally planned to also work on gaining ballot access in Indiana, Colorado, and Nevada, but have dropped them from the list after advice from their counsel. I'm actually surprised they dropped Nevada. I understand Colorado, but I'm surprised they dropped Nevada and Indiana. Because I would think he would appeal. Nevada can be wishy-washy, right? And Indiana, I would think he could appeal to voters in Indiana as well. That's interesting. Interesting. But American Values 2024 will still dedicate between 10 to 15 million to smaller list of states. A statement outlining the new plan also said it's confident that Kennedy could win a contingent election, a possible scenario where no presidential candidate gets 270 electoral college votes. Under such a scenario, congressional delegations from each state cast votes to choose the next president. This is the method that Roger Meadows was referring to, that these third-party and independent candidates make it so that neither Dem nominee or Republican nominee get to the 270 votes. That's actually smart. I'm not going to hate on it. I'm still pissed at RFK because of his Israel position, but that's actually a smart strategy. And when it comes to ballot access, so it appears that RFK Jr. has just met the signature threshold in Utah to qualify for the ballot. Now, this is interesting because Cornel West actually also, I don't know what's going on with Utah, but Cornel West also recently had like a town hall meeting in Utah as well. So interesting. It says RFK Jr. has met the signature requirement to qualify to be on Utah's 2024 general election presidential ballot. The Salt Lake County Clerk's office confirmed to CBS News Thursday, pushing the independent candidate one step closer to getting on the ballot in that state. So he met the 1,000 signature threshold needed, and that is according to Salt Lake County's voter services manager, Ron Buckley. Okay, so we have RFK Jr. meeting the threshold for Utah. Now, we talked about that strategy so far. But here's a strategy. I don't know whose idea this was. I'm about to show you this video clip. I don't know who came up with this. I don't know who's making these kind of decisions. Here's a strategy that I don't think was a good idea. RFK Jr. released a video acknowledging the Armenian genocide. And it's just, given what he has said about the Palestinian people and the current ongoing genocide right now in Gaza, this is just very damning. It's very damning. And this is just so much. It's so, oh my God. We're gonna bring it up. Here we go. I couldn't believe this when I saw this the other night. I was like, is this for real? Is he serious? To help avert yet another war and uphold the principles of freedom and democracy, the U.S. government needs to mobilize regional support for the Armenians' right to self-defense and self-determination. I'm not even making this up, you guys. It's not comedy hour. But how can you acknowledge that the Armenian people need the right for self-defense and self-determination, but you can't do that for the Palestinian people? Listen to the video. Oh, honey, I don't know whose idea this was.
Over 100 years ago, during World War I, the Ottoman Empire perpetrated the first genocide of the modern era when it murdered 1.5 million ethnic Armenians. That ethnic cleansing wiped out thousands of years of Armenian presence in Anatolia. Today, the oldest of all Armenian territories is now the victim of an ethnic cleansing campaign. This time it's Artsakh, also known as Nagorno-Karabakh.
So he can acknowledge ethnic cleansing campaign. You see what's happening here? He can acknowledge that there was ethnic cleansing in reference to the Armenian people. He can acknowledge that. Cannot acknowledge it when it comes to the Palestinian people, though.
During the Soviet era, the Kremlin forcibly incorporated this Christian territory into Muslim Azerbaijan. Artsakh had been Orthodox Christian and Armenian for over 1,000 years. It has one of the oldest, most beautiful cathedrals in the world. Beginning in 2020, Azerbaijan ruthlessly launched an ethnic cleansing campaign against this peaceful and peace-loving people. It systematically bombarded population centers with cluster bombs and missiles.
Isn't this the same thing happening in Gaza? Isn't this the same thing? And by the way, yes, the Armenian genocide was no joke. The United States government didn't even acknowledge that until Donald Trump's presidency. if you can believe it or not. It's real. It happened. It is what it is. It was wrong. But when you look at these pictures, how does this look any different from what you're seeing in Gaza right now?
And in September, Azerbaijan launched an unprovoked invasion and expelled all 120,000 ethnic Armenians. While the world was focused on Gaza and Israel with indignation and outrage from every direction, we heard almost nothing about this mass expulsion of the entire population of one of the oldest Armenian states on the planet. Empty condemnations of this ethnic cleansing campaign are not enough. Unlike the 1915 genocide, this one is reversible.
You guys hearing this? You hearing this shit? Are you hearing this? So see, this right here tells me, this is why I feel like it's personal for him. I feel like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like he has something against, whether it's the religion, whether it's because, you know, a lot of the Palestinian people in Gaza are Muslim, even though they're also Palestinian Christians, they're also Palestinian Jews. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's just he's taken AIPAC money, which probably it could be both. It could be a combination of things. But to sit here and actually acknowledge ethnic cleansing of another group, but you can't acknowledge it when it's happening to the Palestinian people, this is clown shit. Like, I can't.
The U.S. government needs to organize and mobilize the global community to take action to ensure the safe return of Armenians to Artsakh and to defend their right to self-determination. This is a situation where peaceful sanctions could actually work. The U.S. still has leverage in that region, and it can use that power to mobilize all of the nations in that region to.
So he supports sanctions in reference to for the Armenian people. He supports sanctions, but he's against BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, when it applies to the state of Israel on behalf of the Palestinian people.
Reverse this humanitarian tragedy. We should also seek the removal of the blockades in Armenia by Turkey and Azerbaijan.
Go back to that one, honey. Now he's talking about removal of blockades.
Tragedy. We should also seek the removal of the blockades in Armenia by Turkey and Azerbaijan.
But won't agree to the removal of the blockade of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Won't agree to won't acknowledge the illegal settlements that are happening in the West Bank by the state of Israel. Still wants the Palestinian peoples to be caged in like animals. But when it comes to another group, he has no problem admitting, okay, we need to remove the blockade and we need to implement some type of peaceful sanctions.
Armenia is a landlocked nation, and it needs access to ports and to the surrounding countries. As President of the United States, I will use diplomacy, our moral authority, our economic leverage, and sanctions to restore Armenia to a nation of peace and justice. I want to commit this country to the restoration of the sovereignty of Armenia and Artsakh, and to the restoration of its territory. I want to do this peacefully. Instead of starting another war somewhere, I'd like to stop one.
I don't know whose idea this was. Like, it's laughable to me. There's no way. No way. I saw this the first time I watched this, I was laughing my ass off. I was like, are you serious? So there's that. So that's RFK in reference to strategy. Now we move on to Cornel West in reference to strategy here. There's something, I don't know if you've noticed this. Cornel West is focusing on different areas as well. You'll see this with Jill Stein and RFK and Cornel West. Cornel West has been primarily focusing on some of the rural areas that I didn't think that he would go to. Here's an example here in reference to strategy. Cornel West said, what a blessing it was to meet the precious people of Omaha, Nebraska. This campaign is on the move, and we look forward to seeing you in 2024. So I have just a piece of this clip here that I do want to say. Listen to what he said to people in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is really interesting. Like I said, he spoke to people in Utah. He went to Mississippi, to rural part of Mississippi, to speak to people there. He's going to areas that I think people may not have expected him to go to. And it was recently announced by Dr. West that he tends to focus on Muslim voters in Michigan that no longer want to support Joe Biden. So there's that too. Let's get into this.
And the question becomes, how do we reintroduce America to the best of itself? Are you going to end up losing your planet with ecological catastrophe? We were there at the coal plant, weren't we? And we did a video and we told them, you said you're going to shut down this coal plant 4 years ago, and you still got it here. And you know it's targeting mainly the vulnerable ones, the ones that you think are not organized enough to bring power and pressure to bear. You're not doing that on the other side of town. We need to shut it down and shut it down now. That's environmental racism at the deepest level. And nearly every empire undergoes fundamental dissolution based on military overreach abroad. America has 800 military units around the world, special operations in 100 countries. Isn't that something? Russia got 29 and China's got 4. Wow. We got 800. Why? Because we got to be an empire to dominate every corner of the globe. That's what the elite say in Washington. They want total dominance across the board. And I could hear the best of my folk, my tradition saying, America, why don't you just be a decent and dignified nation among nations? Treat other nations the way you would want to be treated. Take the golden rule seriously. What makes you think that somehow you, like Rome, have to be the grand empire to dominate the whole world, while the 1% at home are dominating the poor and working classes of all colors? It's spiritually obscene. It's morally bankrupt. No social experiment can survive over time. With military overreach abroad, massive corruption among elites in both parties, the two-party system itself more and more an impediment. If all we can do is come up with a Trump leading us toward a second civil war and Biden leading us toward a third world war, we in a world of trouble. We in a world of trouble.
So there's Cornel West again. That is Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. And you can see the people in the room, different peeps, right? Talking to them about foreign policy decisions that have happened under the two-party system. And I think that that's really important. You know, I'm glad that he had that conversation with people. But that's one of those places people would not think to go to. Now, why is Nebraska important? I'll let you guess. Anyone in the chat, tell me why you think the state of Nebraska is important in reference to a presidential election. We'll see. I'll give it a couple seconds to see who can guess. Public domain says does not need a teleprompter. Anybody know? Kingy said farmers. No. It's the birthplace of Terrence Bud Crawford. No. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Someone got it. Someone got it. Where is it? I want to make sure I get the first person. Shoot, I saw it. Team Orca, says they have a funky electoral college. And where's the other one? Want to see more said guess electoral votes. Getting warmer, getting warmer. Tomfoolery. They apportion electoral college differently. Nebraska, that's right, Cool Blue, split electoral votes. Ding, 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 ding. Nebraska, there's a district in Nebraska that has ranked choice voting. So Nebraska is important Just FYI. Now, also in reference to the strategy, we talked about RFK Jr. getting the signature requirement for Utah. Dr. Cornel West actually received ballot access for Alaska, and I'm going to tell you why Alaska is important. It says Dr. West receives Alaska ballot access with ambitious $10,000 UBI initiative. Independent candidate Dr. West, backed by Alaska's Aurora Party, has obtained ballot access in Alaska for the 2024 U.S. presidential election, making him the first independent candidate in the state to achieve the feat. So that's huge. But listen to this part. This is the big piece. As part of the Aurora Party nomination and party line ballot access achievement, Brother West will introduce a significant plan to raise the Alaska permanent dividend to $10,000 per resident as part of a larger plan to eliminate poverty within the state. Let me talk about Alaska for just a second. Alaska has a UBI. If I remember correctly, I think the UBI that residents received in Alaska was like, what, $1,000 a year or something like that? And they get it from the oil industry. Dr. West is basically telling them that he wants to give them $10,000 per resident. Remember, Alaska, it's an oil state, right? Like a lot of people that live in Alaska, they work for like the oil companies. So that's important, the UBI. There's another reason why Alaska is important, because Alaska has ranked choice voting. So we're looking at all the strategies here, folks. We're looking at all the strategies. And then there was this piece here from Dr. West, which I think was a very smart move, which it seems like this was encouraged by Sam Husseini. This call here in reference to Israel and Palestine, which is something that honestly RFK Jr. should be doing too. Everybody should be doing this that's running for president right now. He said it's time for the world to invoke the Genocide Convention and bring such a case before the International Court of Justice. Holding leaders like Netanyahu and the IDF accountable is not just an obligation, a legal obligation, but a moral one. We must take a stand against all form of human rights violations and actively work towards peace and accountability. And he was actually retweeting Sam Husseini here because Sam said the ICC has been worse than useless. West, like Lula and others, has called Israel's slaughter genocide. So he should call for invoke genocide convention at the ICJ now. Now, if he got on the phone to parliamentarians around the world, he could probably make it happen. So Dr. West saw that, retweeted that, and he actually mentioned that in the interview with Piers Morgan recently. So that is actually a good call. That was a smart move by Dr. West. And I want to let you know today, I found out it was announced that South Africa has actually decided to invoke the Genocide Convention. So just FYI. So that's a smart move in reference to strategy. Now we're talking about pros and cons with everybody, right? So in reference to the cons, we all know that Dr. West's presidential campaign did not get off to a good start, right? He started with the People's Party, left the People's Party, went to the Green Party, left the Green Party and decided to run as an independent. So it didn't have the best start out the gate. One of the other things that I would say is that I think when looking at Dr. West's political platform, his presidential platform for 2024, I think if I were to take all of those policies there that he has and roll it up into a big ball, I would put it under an umbrella of demands and focusing on corruption. And I think that would make all of those pieces gel together. You have to call out the fact that people are corrupt. Another con that I would say, I think that Dr. West is a little too nice towards Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is a fascist. I think Joe Biden needs to be called out. He has been calling Joe Biden out, but I think he's still a little too nice considering, what's happening under Joe Biden now. So there's that. So that's Cornel West's strategy. And now we are moving on to Dr. Jill Stein. We're going to talk about her strategy. Jill Stein, one of the things that she's been doing is that she's been also showing up at Palestine protests. Dr. West has done this as well, but she showed up at Bath Iron Works. So this was pretty huge. It says Dr. Jill Stein joins the main coalition for Palestine protests at Bath Iron Works. Dr. Stein, the 2016 and 2024 Green Party presidential candidate, came to Maine on Friday, December 8th, 2023, to join the main coalition for Palestine protests at Bath Iron Works. The protest was held to demand that General Dynamics / Bath Iron Works stop arming Israel's genocide in Gaza. Other groups participating in the protests included Maine Voices for Palestinian Rights, Students for Justice in Palestine from various college campuses, etc. And you can see there was the advertisement for it there. So that is something that Jill Stein has been doing. She's been talking about foreign policy for a long time. Everyone knows that Jill Stein is anti-war. So this isn't something that she just started talking about recently. She's been talking about this for quite a long time. The other thing about Jill Stein that you got to remember is that, like Cornel West, Jill Stein did not start out as a politician. She's a medical doctor. Dr. West is an academic, right? So these are things to remember. She doesn't come from a political family. He doesn't come from a political family, right? RFK Jr. does come from a political family. But so in reference to strategy with Jill Stein, one of the things that she's doing is she's focusing on a lot in reference to the war climate, anti-war, and she's also making that connection to the climate disaster that we have in the world. So she's putting those two things together. The other thing is this. Jill Stein is running through the Green Party. The Green Party has its criticisms, has its problems as well. But Jill Stein just got this. And this is also going to be huge. In 2016, Jill Stein, the presumed 2024 Green Party candidate, got about 34,000 votes, 1.3% of the vote in Arizona. Biden beat Trump by 12,000 votes in the state of Arizona in 2020. The Green Party was not on the ballot. Stein could be the difference in 2024. And check this out. Breaking news. We are on the ballot in Arizona. Congrats to Arizona Green Party for this huge win, bringing Green Party ballot access to 20 states and counting. So when we talk about strategy, why is Arizona important? Same thing as I said about with RFK Jr. Arizona, again, is important because there were a lot of independent voters that showed up in 2020 to support Joe Biden. Now that you have the Green Party on the ballot in Arizona, things will be different this time around. Remember, they were not on the ballot in Arizona in 2020. That's huge. So she's on the ballot in Arizona. West is on the ballot in Alaska. RFK Jr. just got the signatures for ballot access in Utah. She goes on to say, we're well on the way to getting our urgently needed pro-worker, anti-war climate action campaign on the ballot across the U.S. When we're talking about strategy, right now, out of all the three candidates, Jill Stein has the most ballot access. She is on the ballot in 20 states in the country. It's not even 2024 yet. And if I am willing to make a bet, 9 times out of 10, she's probably going to get access in over 40 states like she did when she ran in 2016. That's one of the perks, one of the good things about running through the Green Party, because they already started with ballot access for a number of states from the beginning, right? So now I know you guys are waiting to hear what I have to say. There's one more thing about Jill Stein, and there's this. She's been here before. Jill Stein has ran for president before. RFK and Cornel West have not. Jill Stein knows the tricks that the media will play because she's been through it before. She knows how to handle it because she's been through it before. She's been arrested for showing up to debate. And they said that she could not debate. So she knows what's coming her way. And then there was also this. That time that Jill Stein had to remind people what it actually means to have a true democracy in this country. Listen to this. And this woman is a doozy.
Or more kind ways of putting it. Out front now, Jill Stein, 2016 Green Party presidential candidate. Jill, I appreciate your time. Good to have you back. So, you know, you've been there. You ran as a third party candidate. Should Howard Schultz run?
Well, you know, it's not for me to say, put it that way. I think this is up to the voters. And, you know, I think the panic, the spoiler panic that we're seeing is in many ways a reflection of the panic about, you know, the state of our economy, the state of our climate, the state of our health care, which 30 million Americans don't have any access to, and those who've got health insurance can't afford it. You know, people are really understandably focusing their panic about the economic emergency that most Americans are facing on this election. Understandably, but there's a win-win solution here. We don't have to shut down debate and dialogue in our democracy. We don't have to be in the business of blaming and shaming independent and third-party voters or independent and third-party candidates. There's a solution called ranked choice voting, and everybody should know about it and demand that we have it. The people in the state of Maine just got it. It does away with any possibility of a split election. Spoilers, it makes sure that we have candidates elected by majorities, and it gets rid of negative campaigning. So it's a win-win.
So look, when it comes to the, you know, and I understand you've been advocating for that, but the system we have coming into this election, right, is still what it is. I mean, given
we have
that,
2 years.
Well, yeah, I mean,
2 years until the next election, and we can wait. If half of the, panic that was focused on silencing candidates, which is not good for democracy, if instead that energy were put into lobbying our legislature and getting state legislatures, that's what it takes. This doesn't have to pass in Congress. It can just be at the level of states. There are like 12, a dozen or so states right now that have all Democratic legislatures and a Democratic governor that could pass this in the blink of an eye.
You dealt with it, is what I'm saying. You're not surprised by what you call the panic that is greeting Howard Schultz.
I really understand, that people are, anguished, are just in a state of emergency right now, and that gets focused not always on the most productive places. We need to fix that with a functioning democracy. Choice is essential. There are 100 million voters right now who are not voting because these are largely black, brown, poor, and millennial who've really been locked out of our economic system and locked out of our political system. We need to bring them back in. Choice is not the enemy of a fair and just
turnout in this
voting
country,
system.
of course, has.
Notice how Aaron tried to cut Jill Stein off when she started to mention black and brown communities, and also when she started to mention that the voters should have a choice. We don't need to see this entire interview. I just wanted to show you that because, again, there was that argument about voters having a choice. That video is from 4 years ago. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give you my response. And you may have a different opinion than me. That's totally fine. It is what it is. Who do I think has the best strategy at this point in time? And I'm going to put my bias to the side and just go off of what I just showed you. If we look at what RFK Jr. is doing, focusing on those seven states, that's actually a good idea. I'm not going to hate on that. No shade. Just keeping it real. That's actually a good idea. That could actually work. This effort of preventing Joe Biden or Donald Trump from reaching 270 and then throwing it back to the states. That could actually work. No shade. If we look at what Cornel West is doing in reference to strategy, it actually is a good idea to go to these states, these areas that have a different policy in reference to electoral college, to go to states that have ranked choice voting, That's actually smart. Going to some of these rural communities that have been forgotten about, that's a good idea. If we look at Jill Stein's strategy, running through the Green Party, a party that already had ballot access, now she's got 20 states. She's on the ballot in Arizona, showing up at these protests. Cornel has shown up as protest as well. Good idea. Now for my decision. Who do I think has the best strategy overall? If I had to bank on it right now, I would say the best strategy overall belongs to Dr. Jill Stein. And I'm going to tell you why I believe that. Although I do think RFK Jr. has a good idea in reference to focusing on those 7 states and trying to prevent each president from getting to 270. I totally get that. I think what is going to may hurt RFK Jr., particularly as we get closer to the election and more comes out about his position with Israel. I think what may hurt him is his position on Israel and Gaza. If RFK Jr. does not have some type of change of heart around this issue, or he's not willing to have this conversation with people who are more knowledgeable about what the Palestinian people are going through, I think that could hurt him, particularly with younger voters. There's also this issue. Focusing on those 7 states, while I do think that's a good idea, if you're only focusing on 7 states, you're also opening up yourself to the possibility that 1 or 2 of those states could decide to remove you from the ballot. And then you only had those 7 states. Now you only got 5. There's that possibility as well. Although I think Cornel West's idea of focusing on the rural areas and focusing on places that have ranked choice voting, I think that's a good idea as well, too. But the reality is right now, RFK Jr. has Utah, Dr. Cornel West has Alaska. Looking at it as it is right now, Jill Stein has ballot access in 20 states, and she will get more. She's going to get over 40. She's already done this before, so she knows how to do it. So there's that. 2, Jill Stein has basically combined the worker movement with the anti-war movement as a part of her campaign. That's why you saw in the tweet I showed you, she said, we're working on building a solid worker movement / anti-war. She's put those 2 together, which I think everyone should be doing. She was at the Bath Iron Works, etc. Yada, yada, yada. And then there's also the thing that Jill Stein has been through this before. She knows what she's going to face as a third party candidate. She knows what the media is going to do. She knows all those things are coming. So again, I don't think at the end of the day, because of the system that we have in place, do I think any of these candidates are actually going to win? Most likely, no. But we have to build it. You have to build third party movement. You have to build this anti-duopoly movement, which actually, if Bernie Sanders would have left the Democratic Party, if he would have left and actually went forward with that draft Bernie campaign and moved over towards like third party option, we wouldn't be talking about this today. We wouldn't be talking about possibly building a third party or independent movement. It would have already been done. And we would be further along than we are today. But based on what I see right now, I think that Jill Stein has the best strategy. Does that mean that I think Jill Stein is going to win? No, not absolutely. I think, again, like I said, I get where RFK Jr. is coming from, but I think the more states you have, the more ballot access you have, the better. Because the reality is, we don't know if New York or the other states that RFK Jr.'s campaign is focusing on, you don't know. They could do the same thing to him that some of the states have done to Marianne. They could choose to remove him from the ballot. We don't know. That's why you can't just focus on the 7. But I get what they're trying to do. But if I said who has the best strategy right now, I would say that Jill Stein has the best strategy. We'll have to wait and see what happens in 2024. But that's my review for those 3 candidates and their independent third party run for the end of 2023. Let me go to some of the comments here and we'll finish up with the Tucker story. Where did I go to? Oh, this one. Thank you for the super chat. Nobody voting Nikki Haley. Ukraine war is just a money laundering scheme. Thank you, Cool Blue. All those states except Arizona are 10 populous states. Approximately 53% of all citizens live in a top 10 state. California has 12% alone. Thank you, Flower Bro. Thank you for interviewing Claudia de la Cruz. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is truly a revolutionary party and a sign of a brighter future in this country. Thank you, Flower Bro. Thank you, Roger. The more candidates in the race, the less electoral college votes needed to win. 3 need 180. 4 need, are you trying to say you need? For 3, you need 180. 4, you need 135. And 5 candidates, you only need 108 electoral college votes to win. Good point, Roger. Thank you for this, Sab. He trying to get that Armenian vote in California. He trying to get the Kardashian vote, Roger. Thank you for the super chat, DC. Arizona took a week to count ballots in 2020. Shady as fuck. Thank you for the super sticker, African82. Thank you for the super sticker, Roger Meadows. DMU anti-war Bronx Coalition blasted Yankees. Please show. I will check that out later. And thank you for the super chat, Amy. Happy New Year, Sabby. Happy New Year to you too. Okay, we're going to finish up this story here with Tucker Carlson. I guess Tucker Carlson is on a podcast tour. He was recently on Breaking Points and he had a conversation with Saagar about free speech. And I want to get into that discussion here. Let's go ahead and bring that in. Boop boop.
I think one of the things
It's true.
What a lot of people want to hear from you, I think, is that you played the game at the highest level. And so are all of our suspicions true about what's being told to people in the anchor chair about what you can say, about what you can't say, about commercial impact, about the pressure in the cooker situation as to what's being controlled that people are seeing?
You know, I really should write a book on this, if not that anyone would read it, but just to sort of work out my own thoughts about it. You know, again, when you're working in a business that's that regimented, you know, to show every night at exactly the same time, you can't be late. You know, it's like your whole life, and I wrote my script, so my whole life was about writing my script. Like, that's kind of all I did. So I was telling you that to admit that I missed a lot. I personally, because this was not my first show, it was like my 8th show, that I'd had over the course of my life. I made a very clear deal with my employer out loud and just said, look, I'm not going to be told what to say or think, period. It's not my company. If you don't like what I'm saying, take me off the air. But I'm not going to sort of say or not say something because that would violate my conscience and I can't do that. So, and they agreed, to their great credit. And then at the end, they exercised their option and pulled the plug, which was their prerogative. And I wasn't really mad. I was confused, but I wasn't mad about it, and I'm not mad now. So I'm not really sure, but I will say, looking back on it, the Ukraine war and the vax, and to some extent January 6th, on which I think I've been fundamentally vindicated, and I had out-of-step views on all 3 things, but 2 of them were absolutely, you know, were red lines, like you couldn't go there. And I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, I think for different reasons. The vax, because obviously the pharma companies are the biggest advertiser in media. They don't advertise to sell their products. You're not, you know, people aren't buying mostly, you know, they can't buy.
Let me pause here for a second. You know what was interesting about this is he said like certain areas he could not go, or he was not supposed to go there in reference to mainstream media. What's interesting is that you can't go there on YouTube either. That's the thing. Like I just thinking about that, like, it's not just about what you can't say on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. Yes, don't get me wrong. Mainstream media has a narrative and it's usually the same or close to what the State Department has, right? But also, you can't go there on YouTube either. So what does that tell you?
Buy them directly. So why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that not to sell the product, but to influence the coverage of the product. And that's very effective. So I crossed that line in a big way because I thought the vax was dangerous, and it turns out it was. And then on Ukraine, it's like every single person in the top 1% for income and influence, like literally almost every single person heard this weird frequency, this dog whistle that commanded them to worship Zelensky. And I'm not exactly sure what that was. I looked at Zelensky and I'm like, that guy's really bad.
Yes.
He wants to get my country involved in a nuclear war. And, you know, I don't know him, so I'm not attacking him personally, but anyone who wants my kids to risk death in a nuclear war is my enemy. It was just kind of that simple. So I was like, this guy's evil to the extent that he's acting against my children's interests. And saying that was like, oh my gosh, it was like a bomb going off. Like people couldn't even deal with it. And I'm not quite sure what that was, other than everybody in Aspen, Nantucket, Jackson, and Bethesda was like all in on this thing. And someday historians will discover why. I really don't know, but that fact is true.
That's such an important point. And this is another thing too. I've always respected them most is, you know, to a certain extent, I rejected the system early on, but you came up in it and you also openly gave them the middle finger, even while growing up next to them, living next to them for years. Yeah. I've watched it with Ukraine and I watch it now with Israel. You know, I watched in particular, there was a lot of consternation around some comments you made, I think by Ben Shapiro and other, where you were like, well, I've never seen this level of care about Americans who are dying of fentanyl, which I think is a traditional nationalist message. And yet I've watched the entire kind of right-wing ecosystem get embroiled in fundamentally what is a third world conflict. Now we can say support, you know, not support, we can have criticisms, et cetera, of that. But what explains this like literal allegiance to narrative on Ukraine, on Israel? Why is it that so many of these people don't seem to have the same level of care for actual American citizens?
So Saagar is being disingenuous with this question. And let me explain why. Saagar was a part of the Hudson Institute think tank, right? Like Saagar knows the answer to this question. He knows that the military industrial complex controls our politicians. He knows that they also control the media, the State Department. Like all this is wrapped up into one thing. So Saagar knows this. He knows the answer to this question. And it's not even so much about that people don't think about America first. It's about the donors and the billionaire class that actually control the way that things work in this country are the ones who have the first and final say so. That's just how it is. You may sit back and believe and say, yes, I believe in America first, but all it takes is for a donor to come your way. And a lot of these politicians just sell out altogether. But the thing is, Saagar knows that. Let's continue.
You know, I find it really distressing. And in both of those conflicts, I approached it with a clean conscience because I just don't have strong feelings one way or the other. And I'm not hostile. I've never hated Ukraine. I don't have any feelings about Ukraine. And Russia, same thing. I've never been to either place, and I'm not invested emotionally. So I could just look at it from an American perspective. In the case of Israel and the Arab world, I've spent a fair amount of time in both, and I like both. And I felt terrible for the people who were killed on October 7th. I still do. So I had no weird motive. I was just like thinking about it from an American perspective. Is this good for us or is it not? And I was just amazed by the intolerance and the willingness to immediately go to invective and character assassination. And it's like, I said, you know, first of all, if the people who live in Gaza who are being moved out are so evil and dangerous.
Let's pause. We're going to get into this conversation. Let's pause for a second. So this is where what was interesting to me about this conversation is like, I don't think Tucker Carlson was shot. I felt like Tucker also was being disingenuous with this part. The fact that he was surprised that he got pushback. Of all the years of, especially these two in particular, working in media, they've been there a lot longer than I have. I'm still fairly new. They know when it comes to the state of Israel, they know. They know that AIPAC controls a lot of these politicians. They know about J Street. They know about the Israeli lobby. So they know that if you give some type of criticism towards the state of Israel, they know people come for your head. They know that. You can't tell me. Come on now. You guys know that. And you're a lot of you are not on media, right? Now listen to this part that he says.
That they can't live in the region. Why would you want them to move into?
Oh, this part right here. Yeah. Because see, Tucker doesn't push back here. Pay attention.
And I felt terrible for the people who were killed on October 7th. I still do. So I had no weird motive. I was just like thinking about it from an American perspective. Is this good for us or is it not? And I was just amazed by the intolerance and the willingness to immediately go to invective and character assassination. And it's like, I said, first of all, if the people who live in Gaza who are being moved out are so evil and dangerous that they can't live in the region, why would you want them to move into my country?
Pause. So let me tell you what he just did there. He gave the same talking point that Ron DeSantis gave. If the people in Gaza are that dangerous and evil, why would I want them moved into my country? First of all, there is Hamas and there's the Palestinian people. The majority of the Palestinian people are not Hamas. So again, we have to be very careful about the rhetoric, because what that says, that's basically saying to the Palestinian people, we don't want you here. And what was interesting to me is that some of the same people who said that, I don't know if Tucker feels this way, but some of the same people that said that they didn't want the Palestinian people to come here, like Ron DeSantis, they were totally fine with Ukrainians coming here. They were totally fine with it. They said, bring them on over. You had historical Black college, Hampton University, offering free tuition, room and board for Ukrainian refugees when this war kicked off, boo. People need to understand this, need to understand it. And don't come back and even tell me it's like, oh, well, you know what he meant. No, I don't. I know what people say. And people need to pay close attention. So you've seen people do that. And I know you guys have seen people say that same thing. They'll say, oh, they don't want the Palestinians coming here because they're basically saying that the Palestinian people are Hamas, and that is not true, right? If you thought about the Christian religion, and let's say you had a group of Christian extremists, the ones that go around and they decide to blow up abortion clinics, are you them? No. But a lot of these people were totally fine when they said, oh, yes, let the Ukrainians come here. Let's continue.
I mean, what are you saying? They can't live there because it's too scary to live next to them, but they can live next to me? So I at that point, I felt very hostile about that because it showed such contempt for me and my family and my neighbors and my country. It is my country. That's how I feel.
No, this issue is totally wrong. So this is where I felt like Saagar should have pushed back, and he didn't push back. And I think the reason he didn't push back is because, if there would have been pushback on this, he probably wouldn't have gotten this interview. Let's just keep it real. But the thing is this. The reason why the other countries like Egypt, are not opening the border to let the Palestinian people in is not because they think that they are dangerous. They have gone on record talking about this. It is because they know what Israel is trying to do. They know that Israel is trying to push the people out. And by the way, if Egypt were to open their doors and say, come on over here, the state of Israel, Netanyahu, would not let those people return back to Gaza. They would not be allowed to come back. Egypt knows this. That's why they're not opening up their borders. Jordan is aware of this. The Queen of Jordan discussed this on CNN. That is why they are not letting them come in, not because they think that they are dangerous. And Saagar really should have pushed back on that rhetoric. And I got to push back there because I don't want people watching this show thinking that Palestinians are dangerous people. Let's continue.
Feel about it anyway. It's all of our country. And so I was like disgusted by that. And I said so. And I don't know why that's weird. Why wouldn't I be offended by that? And then it was immediately, I'm a hater or a bigot or something like that. None of that registered with me because, first of all, I've been attacked for so long, but attacks that aren't true, if somebody said, wow, you've gained some weight this summer, I'd be like, oh, it would hurt my feelings because it's true. But if someone's like, oh, you're a hater or you hate, that's not true. So I don't really care. But I did think it showed like the level of not just corruption, which I knew, but of like emotional instability and craziness. I mean, there are people, and I stopped reading any of it, but there are people on the right who have spent the last 2 months every single day focused on a conflict in a foreign country as our own country becomes dangerously unstable on the brink of financial collapse, with tens of millions of people who shouldn't be here in the country. We don't know their identities or the purpose of their being here. Like stuff that's could destroy the country for real and make it impossible for my kids to live here. They've said nothing about that, and they're focused with laser intensity on foreign conflicts. And I'm like, at some point, I've got 4 kids. If I'm so caught up in the problems of my neighbor's children and completely ignoring my own children as they get addicted to drugs and kill themselves, I'm not.
We got to pause here for just a second, because I got to chime in for a second. I want you guys to pay attention to dog whistles, okay? Because first of all, let's be clear. And I think most of you watching this can understand at least this perspective. Tucker Carlson is rich. When he talks about it may be impossible for his kids to live, his kids will be fine. He's rich. I'm not, and most of you are not. When you talk about like whether or not this country will be possible for certain people to live here, people who have money will be fine. The people who will not be fine are those who are working class and those who are poor. It just is what it is. Like, I got to call it out. He'll be all right. He was a Swanson.
Against helping my neighbor's kids, but clearly I don't love my kids. I mean, that's the only logical conclusion, and they don't care about the country at all. And that's kind of their prerogative, but I do, because I have no choice, because I'm from here, my family's been here hundreds of years, I plan to stay here. Like, I'm shocked by how little they care about the country, and including the person you mentioned. And I can't imagine how someone like that could get an audience of people who claim to care about America, because he doesn't, obviously, right?
Right. Well, I mean, Tucker, we've seen it too on free speech. I mean, people who've become multimillionaires, who've made entire careers, who've literally became famous, on this very reason. I know you've spoken about this previously, but it's very important to our audience as well. Is that standing up for free speech rights of people you disagree with is probably the most important exercise, and we've seen some of that come for American citizens on Palestine. How do you work through this too when we're both under such immense pressure, even social pressure of like, how could you support this? Take maybe the context of the university presidents. We've got billionaires like Bill Ackman, I'm curious what you make of this. My assessment is they're upset that they're not included as marginalized within the DEI regime.
Let me pause here for a second. Margatina says, he is not totally wrong here. My cousins in Chicago are only focused on local issues / migrants. I understand that, Margatina, but are your cousins in Chicago millionaires? See, that's the thing. Tucker will be fine.
Claim to be against the DEI regime. But will you really keep going to make sure that, all this racial hatred and all this other that's been enshrined in elite institutions will be, once you get a win, are you really going to keep going past that? What's your assessment of this general moment on Palestinian, free speech hypocrisy and more?
Well, we have free speech in this country, and it applies to people we disagree with by definition. Period. I mean, it's the first right guaranteed that, of course, it precedes government. It's given to us by God, as the document says. But it's the first right enumerated in our founding documents. So it's the foundation of the country. And so you can't give any ground on that, like none. And anyone who would give ground on that, and I would include the governor of Florida, who I think is a good governor, and I like him personally, but signing a censorship bill enforced completely unacceptable. And I don't care what your motives are. I mean, this spring, there was some Black nationalist group that was indicted by the Biden Justice Department.
So that's the African Socialist People's Party that he's referring to. That's Amali Yeshitela, Chairman Amali Yeshitela, who's the chairman of that group. I've interviewed him on this show multiple times. That's the group that he's referring to. Actually, it was that segment, I believe, that he did. And it was honestly, I feel like a couple days after that when he was removed from Fox News.
For its views on Russia. And my first thought was, that's not acceptable. Now, how much do I have in common with the Black nationalist group that I guess probably hates people who look like me? Actually, probably 100% chance I'd like him if I had dinner with him. To be honest, I'm sure they're really good guys. I mean, I just
want to interject here as well, because obviously Saagar, remind me, guys, and let me know, did Breaking Points have Amali Yeshitela on? I don't know if they did. Maybe they did. Let me know in the chat. But I actually spoke to Amali Yeshitela multiple times on the show. And I do just want to correct something here, because I don't want people to hear what he just said and run with it. First of all, the African Socialist People's Party do not hate white people. So there's that. They don't hate people that look like him. So I did just want to interject there to make that statement. And what's up, Danny? Happy New Year to you too. Thank you.
Feel that, but whatever. It was irrelevant to me. You can't do that. You can't try to put people in prison for expressing opinions the government doesn't like, or the ruling class doesn't like, or any opinion. Any opinion must be protected, or no opinions are protected. So anybody who seeks to limit my ability to say what I think, believe what I want, is treating me as a slave. I mean, not as a human being, and certainly not as a citizen. That's just really clear. And I don't know why people don't grasp this. But you know, one sort of parenthetical, ironic note, to see people who spent a career mocking, you know, the sensitive liberals on campus who want safe spaces and they're, you know, feeling in danger because opinions are violence, say that exact same thing. People feel unsafe. What? You know, no. You know, words are not violence. You have to tolerate them in a free society, or it's not a free society. As to the question of DEI, the whole thing is Jim Crow. I mean, it's grotesque. The idea.
Let me pause here. See, I was with them there for a minute in reference to the censorship issue. He's correct. Like the first part that he said here, when he talks about how people say that they feel unsafe. So this is another thing that has come up when I used to work at universities as well. Like, it honestly had gotten to the point where someone could say something to you, not threatening. Like, obviously, if someone is threatening to cause physical harm to you, that's one thing. But someone could just say something like, on accident, maybe they called you someone else's name or whatever. All this kind of stuff that come up over the years. And it's like, you could basically just say, I feel threatened by this person. Just like what you see is happening now, the college campuses, where some of the Jewish students have come forward and they said that they don't feel safe because of the protests that were happening. And they said they're calling for the end of all Jewish people. That is not what those protests were calling for. I've covered those protests. I've been at those protests. So it has reached this point to where, what can you say and what can't you say? And how can you say it? And this is where you get into a dangerous territory, right? Because actually, someone on a college campus can say that you made them feel unsafe, and you may not have said anything that was threatening to them at all, but because they have that right to do so, you see how this can go and where people can take this. Now he gets into this part about DEI. I'm gonna let him finish what he's saying, but I'm explaining to you why that exists in the first place.
That certain people on the basis of immutable characteristics get certain privileges and other people are hurt on the basis of their immutable characteristics, like that's totally incompatible with America. It's got to be a colorblind meritocracy or it can't keep going because it's a pluralistic society.
Let's talk about being colorblind, right? So when I was growing up, I remember have you ever I don't know, have any of you ever had like that one friend and it's like, somewhere along the way, the conversation of race would come up and they would say, I don't see color at all. And, you know, I had to say to a friend of mine one time, a couple years ago, I was like, you don't have to tell me that. You don't have to come to me and say that you don't see color. I don't know if you feel like that's supposed to make me feel better or comfortable around you. You don't have to say that, because the reality is you do see color. Everyone sees color. Stop it with the I don't see color shit. Everybody sees color. You all of you guys saw the color of my hair tonight when I put up the pictures and asked you, which one should I do? Brown or blonde? We all see color. So let's stop pretending that we don't. Now, that being said, why does DEI exist? I can speak about it from the university perspective, okay? Some of you can speak about it from the corporate perspective. I'm going to talk about the university perspective. The reason why it exists, especially at predominantly white academic institutions, is because along the way, we'll talk about the hiring side, then we'll talk about the student side. When it came to the hiring side, what they found is that particularly some of the hiring managers, we'll say a lot of the hiring managers who were usually white, would hire people that looked like them and would overlook people that had the credentials and the qualifications, but did not look like them. I saw this at the university with faculty searches, where like obviously here in Boston, most of the college years are predominantly white. I saw it at MIT, although MIT was probably better than some of the other ones. Boston University was terrible, just terrible. Because no matter what department you worked in, mostly when it came to the faculty, most of the faculty members were white. They always had like one black faculty member. That was their diversity, right? But typically that's how it was. So what would happen is when you would have faculty searches, it's like they would bring in people from across the country to interview for these positions, especially if it's a tenure track position. They're picky. And like they would totally overlook qualified candidates because they did not look like them. I kid you not. And so this was something that was proven throughout the university system, is that these hiring managers, and especially the faculty members, they would only hire people that looked like them. And it's not even necessarily to say that they were doing it on purpose. Sometimes it was subconscious, because the reality is a lot of times you pick someone that looked like you. There was a book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting at the Table in the Cafeteria, or sitting together in the cafeteria, right? Because that's what happens a lot of times. You walk into the lunchroom, you're in school. What do people usually do? They usually go towards the tables where people look like them. So the reason why the DEI was put in place, particularly at the universities, was because there were people that were very talented that were being overlooked, especially when it came to management positions and faculty positions, just because they didn't look like the people that were making the hiring decisions. That's why it exists. Hiring side, student side. The reason why it exists on the student side in reference to universities is because when it came to admissions, and I've been on admissions boards, when it came to admissions, a lot of times, again, if you go into a room with an admission committee, most of the time at these elite institutions, everybody looked the same. So they were the ones that were actually deciding which students we should accept into this program. This becomes worse when you get to the competitive PhD programs, by the way. So what would happen is they would admit people that look like them. That's why the DEI was in place in the first place. So if Tucker wants a colorblind society, you have to change people's biases. You have to change their bias, and you have to educate people about just accepting people based on their merit and their skill and not based on what they look like. And we have not reached that point in this country yet. It's 2023. We still haven't gotten there. That's why it exists. Let's continue.
There's no majority of anything that has, anything in common. So to keep the country together, it has to be based on merit. I mean, game this out. And also, by the way, we're going to get to violence really soon if this stuff continues. Right. If you tell people that this group or that group is bad because they're in that group, because they look a certain way or because their parents looked a certain way, if you tell them that over time, that group's going to get hurt.
But that's exactly what we do in this country. That's a problem. That's exactly what people are doing in reference to the Palestinian people. That's exactly what we do in this country right now. That's the problem. Let's continue.
We don't need to guess about this. Well, actually, it happened in Europe not that long ago, but it's happened throughout history. So why are we tolerating this even for a second? And the reason, of course, is white guilt and self-hatred. Well, whatever. Get over it. It's not about white people. It's not about any specific group. It's about the country. The country can't continue if we allow this to continue. So I think DEI is, people say, well, you don't like it because you're white. It hurts you or whatever. Well, okay, but yeah, sure. But that's kind of not the point. I wouldn't like it if it was aimed at Filipinos. And I would be every bit as loud about it. Like, why would I like that? It's totally immoral. It's the thing we said we hated, Jim Crow, and the Nuremberg laws. I mean, name it. It's the original sin of man, attacking people on the basis of things that they can't control. They were born with. Like, you can't do that, period.
But you can do that, Tucker. See, this is the thing. You can do that. That happens in this country all the time, where people are attacked based on how they were born, whether it's the color of their skin, whether it's how much money their parents make, what neighborhood they grew up in, their zip code. That's another big one. It happens all the time. So for Tucker Carlson to sit up there and say that DEI is Jim Crow were actual laws that put Black people at the bottom. And I told you this before, and you guys can look this up. A recent report came out. When it comes to net worth in this country, Black people are still at the bottom. So I think what people like, and with Saagar, I don't know, man. Saagar, I feel like Saagar doesn't push back. And I'm not saying you have to attack people, but there were a couple of things that Tucker Carlson said there that I feel like Saagar could have pushed back on, but he doesn't seem to want to attack people. But the thing is that we cannot sit up here and pretend like color isn't a thing. It is a thing. And I think, see, people like Tucker and Saagar, like they want this world to like, we don't need to have DEI. We don't need to have any of these things. Everybody's just a human being and we can all just get along and support each other. But that's not the reality. The reality is this country is still very segregated. May not necessarily be so by law as it was in Jim Crow South, but it's still very much segregated by choice. But people like Tucker and Saagar want you to pretend that color isn't an issue. If color and race wasn't an issue, people wouldn't segregate by choice. So these are things that they need to understand. You can watch the whole interview on Breaking Points. Tucker sounds off on Ben Shapiro, Israel, free speech, and UFOs, etc. You can watch the full interview there. But I definitely think there were some moments where I feel like Saagar should have stepped in. That's my take on that. I agree with him in reference to what he was saying about the censorship. But it was also kind of funny because wanting to silence DEI is also kind of like censorship. Very interesting. All right. Thank you for the super chat, Penny Arcos. Pro fetus, procreate, but Palestine, ? Someone mentioned that on Twitter. Someone had mentioned, they were like, what about all the people that are pro-life? How do they feel about what's happening to the kids in Palestine? Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Those HSBUs ought to be ashamed, taking in Ukrainians after how they treat Black people. Yet Ivy League must be forced to consider Black people. Thank you so much for that. And Danny said, if color weren't a problem, Wells Fargo wouldn't have been caught calling Black people mud people when giving them junk mortgages. Exactly. I don't know why people don't push back on this guy, man. I think it's just because they really want to continue to have him come back on their show. I don't know. I don't know if it's because they're friends with him or whatever, but just because he may be your friend or someone that you want to interview again, some of those talking points should have been pushed back on. All right, guys, that is it for me. It is Friday. I am not here Sunday. It's New Year's Eve, so I will just be chilling. So I'll be back again live on Tuesday. Thank you guys so much. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.
you.